Good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you to the day 4 of the Autocar Professional Two-Wheeler Week, a virtual event where we have been taking a holistic look at the two-wheeler industry and all the things concerning it. India has the highest number of road accidents in the world, and with a low per capita income, two-wheelers form the bulk of the traffic volume. Two-wheeler riders are also the most vulnerable of all motorists on the road, which is why safety is imperative on all counts. To discuss the emerging safety trends and challenges in the two-wheeler segment, I would like to invite Mr. Krishan Kohli, Head of India Market, Hydraulic Braking System and Vehicle Dynamics, Continental Automotive Brake Systems India. A very good morning, Krishan.
Good morning, Mayank. Very good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking out the time for this interview. Krishan, today we are going to talk about safety in the two-wheeler segment. And I would want to start off with the safety regulations in the two-wheeler space. We've seen CBS and ABS getting mandatory. What are your thoughts about the evolution of the policy framework in India?
Yeah, thank you, Mayank, and really honored to be here for this session today, and greetings from Continental again. I think on the two-wheeler safety and regulations in the Indian market, we definitely have really now come a long way in the last couple of years with a very, very clear focus from the government of India on the safety regulations. And I think to begin with, I would start, there are multiple safety, both active and passive, which has been ingrained by design in past. But I think in the last few years, 2019, April beginning, there is a ABS legislation that was kicked off. And this is for a 125cc and above two-wheelers of all segments, motorcycle and scooters. And this brings in a lot of additional safety features into the vehicles, both for the drivers and also pedestrians. So the ABS functionality, if I may speak a little bit, I think it helps whenever there is aggressive braking or a panic braking mode. There, I think maintaining the stability and steerability of the wheels and vehicle, that is what the ABS functionality is, and that really helps the driver to really handle the panic situations. And this regulation already kicked off. Additional to this, I think in 2020, the government has been again continuing the focus on safety for two-wheeler segment. And then there is more additional topics which have come in. For example, one thing which is important for the drivers and the co-passenger. So there is a sari guard which has been also introduced, but more than that, I think also the handholds and the footrest. So these are small things, but definitely they help both the pillion rider and the driver to handle and manage the vehicle better. So continuously the government has been focusing to increase the safety via some regulations as well as focus on the two-wheeler side. Yeah.
Right, Krishan. What could be other legislations that the government could look at, and as a tier one major which works with the vision zero philosophy. So do you have a wish list or some suggestions that you would want, to put in the mind of the government?
Yes, Mayank, I think very important for players like Continental, where we are definitely partnering both with the OEMs as well as organizations like NCAP to drive the safety vision. So Continental has a zero safety vision, and part of that vision, we want zero fatalities, especially the solutions that we provide in the market. So if we talk of the ABS functionalities right now, I think there is many more functionalities that are in discussion as we speak, and some of them already in adoption, and some of them would be coming up in the near term. So if I go a little specific on these functions, so beyond the ABS, I think we also have. If I speak first on the products and solutions, so India is a very price sensitive market, and then you have two wheels in a two-wheeler. So typically there is a drum in past, and then there is a drum and disc. So ABS works with the disc brake. And so here the front wheel has been ABS enabled. So that's a single channel product that works in, but also there is a dual channel which can then operate both the wheels. And Continental has both the solutions which are already available in the market, localized for the market. And then comes the functions and functionalities. So we do have, for example, different ride modes, which is more like a performance function that people are looking at. But also, I think there are other functions like optimized curve braking, which also is something that is much required when you are actually doing curve driving. And then there are other functions that will also kick in. For example, emergency brake assist as one function. And then we have solutions which are integrated braking. So that's a motorcycle integral brake solution, MIB, that we call. But overall, I think now going to the next level, we also would see there are ARAS functions. So like in four-wheelers, you have the autonomous driving and assist functions. So in motorcycle, also you will have the ARAS functions which will be kicking in. And these functions typically, so to say, there is blind spot detection that will help the drivers. Even lane change assist is another function. And there is intelligent headlight assist, traffic signal assist, and adaptive cruise control. So these are some of the functions which are also common into the four-wheeler market, but even two-wheeler, we would see these coming in future. So beyond ABS, multi-functionality, including the ARAS functions that I would see over the years coming into the motorcycle market and segments.
So, Christian, which are the segments that would find application of these modern systems, that you've just mentioned?
So if we have to segment the two-wheeler market, Mayank, if I step back and see, so there is a two-wheeler constitutes of scooters, and then we have scooterets and mopeds, and then we also have the motorcycle. Now, we also spoke of the power of the vehicles. So the power of the vehicles, if we see, there is a different cc of the powertrain. So 100 cc is a cutoff where mass market is, I think, in that range, 80 to 100 cc, but 125 cc and beyond, where the ABS legislation came in. But if we talk of the high performance motorbikes today, we also go upwards of 600 cc. So when we talk of all the functions, the full-blown functionalities, and then we talk of solutions that Conti has, like a MIB, motorcycle integral brakes solutions. So these are solutions and functions that may be required in the higher end of motorbikes. But when we talk of India market, I think I would see the mass market is still at 100 cc and 125 cc. So I think the first and foremost ABS legislation already there, and that adoption is going on. So moving the market, there is a mainstream market which is CBS, and then from there moving to ABS. And step by step, I think different functions will come. But some of the functions that I see already, we are working with OEMs, our key players and OEMs are the ride modes, and we are also talking of the optimized curve braking, and then real lift RLP function, where real lift protection we have. The wheelie protection, these are again advanced functionalities with higher end performance bikes. But I think what we already see is the functions that I just mentioned, ride modes and optimized curve braking and RLP functions, which are much in discussion. Yeah.
Christian, Bajaj is going to introduce its new Pulsar 250 today. So all these functions that you just mentioned, the OCB, ride modes, and rear lift protection. So do we expect these functions to be, coming into this 250 to 500 cc segment as well?
Yes, I would say Bajaj is definitely a technology and a performance player in the market, and the segment that you mentioned, we'll definitely see many of these functions already in practice here. But also, if I have to mention, there are many other OEMs in the industry, all the key players, starting from the JOEMs, Hondas, and then we have the 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 Hero and the TVS and the Royal Enfield. So all of them on the higher end of bikes, where we have 200cc and upwards. I think many of these functions are in discussion and already in implementation in
That's
future.
really wonderful. I also want to touch upon this aspect of ABS. Right now under the regulations, ABS is mandatory only beyond 125cc. So do you think there is scope to bring it down the range as well and make it standardized across the board?
Uh, yes, I think Mayank, over time, when we see if I speak little bit on why ABS, I think generally the market understands today, the users also have got an appreciation that these safety products and solutions help enhancing the safety of vehicles and also the passengers and driver. But if we speak of specific some numbers, I think 2020 reports that were published on safety, what we see is road fatalities almost 37% is contributed from two-wheeler segment. So two-wheeler as a solution on two wheels, and definitely we need more safety features to enhance the protection for passengers, drivers. Now, what I see is that over time, the government has been really working to see how we expand the net and not just keep it at 125cc and above, which is already well defined and in execution. But also, can we look at solutions which are covering the mass market, which is 100cc, so which is less than 125cc. There are players which are already in discussion. We are in discussion with some people, some OEMs also for those segments. And there are solutions because India is a cost and a price sensitive market. So you got to get solutions which also work for the market. So maybe there are different products which have to be designed, tailored to these applications and requirements. And Continental already is working on those solutions. And over the time, we will see that the market for ABS expands even on those segments, which is 100cc and 125. Yeah.
That's wonderful news, Christian, because as you mentioned, safety is the priority, especially when you talk about two wheels, which are like, I mean, the rider is the most vulnerable, entity out there on the road. But just to press you a little bit more upon this, there's also the counter narrative that implementation of ABS has led to a cost increase of these motorcycles. So you already mentioned that India is a cost-sensitive market, but what do you think? Is it really the case? I mean, are we seeing regulations really impacting the demand in the market as well?
Uh, I would say a yes, very clear yes. But again, when we talk of the adoptions, so I think here what we have to understand and keep in mind clearly, yes, the price sensitivity of the market is very much there. And with the price sensitivity, then the adoptions sometimes go slow because when we are bringing in technology into any product solution, it could be not just a two-wheeler, but it could be any solution in the market, including white goods. So technology will always come at some cost, but what is important is that cost delta should add to the value offering for the consumer, for the customers. And I think that is where I think not just people like Continental, but also the OEMs also drive towards that. So together we are looking at a couple of things that will help us to get that balance on getting the right technologies, but at the right cost as well. So for Continental, if I have to speak, I think localization becomes a very, very important topic in this side. And I think we are very proud to say that we have actually localized a big part of the value chain, starting from sales and R&D. Not just that, we also have localized manufacturing operations. So there are two plants that are right now feeding the electronic brake solutions for Continental into the market, and we have localized a good part of the electronic control units, which really is the brain behind these solutions, the braking solutions, but also the complete assembly. So in our Gurgaon plant, we manufacture and assemble the final product that we service into the market. But there is a very heavy localization focus that we have. Even going forward, we'll continue to increase our localization content to make these solutions more competitive for the markets like India.
Sure. And is the standardization of the technology, like you mentioned, that going forward we might also see ABS coming below the 100cc segment as well. So will that also enhance your scope to localize these components even further?
I think, Mayank, here what I would like to mention, so it's a yes and no. I think yes is coming from the scale. Scale definitely gets added, so that helps with our supply chain and suppliers. But also, I think we have to understand when I talk of a one-channel ABS, a Conti product is a Minimap, and then you have a two-channel that we are servicing, the MK100 MAP series. So both are ABS, but they have different functionality, different features. And when we look into the hardware constitution, and then there is a big part of the software. So the solutions may, from a bill of material, vary. So because we say one channel is for one wheel and two channel can, and so it's a bigger product. So the complete guts of the product will be different. And likewise, when we are now switching to a lower CC, which is less than 125, it has to be a totally different product. Otherwise, we will not be able to meet the cost expectations of the market. So it's a product which will look very different from the existing ABS products that we already have in the market. And hence, that much of disadvantage we'll get where this is a new product and then the scale will still help us within that family. But it cannot be that all the families of products are standard. So depending on the applications, then there is variations on the hardware and software both. So hardware specific, I think we'll have to leverage the scale within that family, but across families, very limited parts will be common. That's my.
I understand. Okay. So can you give our audience any timeline as to when we can expect the ABS getting into the 100cc segment?
So Mayank, I think this is a great question, and what I would like to mention here is we, Continental, as a player, we definitely work very closely with our customers, which is the OEMs, and we also work with the partners like NCAP that I mentioned earlier to see how we make solutions more safer and better. But at the same time, when we say introduction of a new technology into a particular segment, it is not just people like Conti, it is also the government will also have a role to play where regulations many times help us drive the adoptions in those segments. Coming to the preparedness from Conti side, I think we are looking at a window of well within 2 years where we should have these solutions ready. Right now, it is already completing the first stage of R&D, and I have reviewed with the team. We should have these solutions ready for manufacturing towards second half of 22. And then I think within a 2-year window, we should see commercialization of this products. At the same time, I think it's very important that how the whole ecosystem works towards the getting this adoption. It's not just people like Conti, but the whole ecosystem, including the OEMs and the government regulations, will have to help in that. Yeah.
Right. No, that's really encouraging words coming from you there. You mentioned about localization, and a part of that you've taken is the R&D is also at Continental's, and you're locally developing these solutions. So within that, what potential of India are you leveraging? Do you think that Indians are really strong in software that you're able to tap that capability?
Yes, I think when you pick software as one of the important functions within R&D, I will have an answer as big yes, number one. And then if I speak of Continental overall at India level, and then also for the businesses that I'm responsible, I think Continental has already set up a technical center in India, which is based out of Bangalore. and it's a large technical center that we house more than upwards of 4,000 engineers already, which are working to service both the regional markets in India as well as the global markets. So it's a global technical center. Competencies are in place at Conti level worldwide, and the teams which are there, these 4,000 plus engineers, they support global OEMs in Japan, in Europe, overseas, other markets, China, but also definitely very importantly servicing the Indian OEMs. So what is the message that I give here? Because of the fact that these engineers are servicing even global OEMs, so the competencies are developed to the level of Continental, as well as then, so we have local competencies very much, and then we leverage those competencies also to service the Indian markets and the requirements. Coming specific to the two-wheeler side, I think we have a significant like team which is already sitting in India driving a lot of topics. We began the journey by support functions, and now I think it's a full function team. The base development, which is the innovation products, I think mostly we still house out of Frankfurt R&D center. But for two-wheelers, we have taken a decision that we will drive more content in India going forward. So all the functionalities, including the software and the system development, etc., we definitely software very much there, but also system development and electronics, etc. We will continue building the competence in India so that the India team can support both the regional requirements as well as global support. So that's the vision that we have. But we have currently the R&D teams which can very well support all the Indian OEM requirements.
Right. Krishnan, you mentioned about electronics as well. So, one thing which is really plaguing the entire automotive industry right now, and I can see you smiling there, is the semiconductor crisis. So how are you able to manage it so far? And, what do you think is going to happen forward? And you mentioned about, building capabilities in the whole electronics space as well. So is that also one of the areas where you would want to, as a supplier, hedge your entire supply chain going forward?
Yeah, so Mayank, this is another very important point that you bring in, which is the global semiconductor shortage topic the world is facing. So first, I will just give you a quick snapshot what's happening and how we are impacted, and what is Continental doing to prep up Continental for future. So this topic actually came up during the COVID year, when I think the automotive markets world over, there was a meltdown, and the light vehicle production numbers were really significantly dropping. It was COVID lockdowns, global phenomena. And then also, I think there was another phenomena which was happening in the parallel. There was pressures building on the healthcare as well as consumer, work from home, school from home, college from home, all kind of phenomena. And then you need electronics to support those work from home topics. And then we also see there is another piece that happened is the technology enhancement in all the devices. If you pick a smartphone or a device, and then you look at the home gadgets as well as the white goods consumers, and then look at all the automotive products, including the four-wheelers, passenger cars, and two-wheelers. Everything has undergone a lot of technology upgrade, especially the electronic content and the software content which has got added. So all this has created a lot of pressure on the electronics, and so to say on the semiconductors. So there was a deep kind of crunch on the capacities versus the demand, which went up it shot up in a big way. And with that, I think the whole automotive industry has been reeling in this pressure of semiconductor shortage for now. It's almost a year world over, not just India. India is equally impacted. So right now, I think coming on the semiconductors, there are also detailing. It constitutes of from a silicon. You create a controller or a IC chip or whatever, and this process is very long. It's from start to end, I think almost 25, 27, 28 weeks kind of phenomena, depending on what technology. And if you have to make new capacities, there are two things we have to keep in mind. Very, very capital intensive, upwards of its couple of billions of dollars of investment, upwards of three. And then you also have a time attached to it, more than 2 to 3 years it takes to establish a new capacity for the automotive industry. Having said that, I think we have a lot of players in the market, semiconductors. I will not name them, but everybody is working on how the supply chain capacities are now tailored to the new demand that we saw. And also there are wafer manufacturers. Basically, the crunch was wafers, and then the wafers, silicon wafer manufacturers also enhancing capacity. Your last part of the question, Continental definitely is looking at the strategy in-house versus outsourcing, and how we should see that we do the future readiness and business continuity plans. So very much there is a task force which is working, and there are people from the Continental Automotive Board also which are sitting in this task force, and we have some external help. So we are working on this topic, how we prepare Continental for future readiness for any such eventualities that come in future.
Right. Like this disruption, Christian, there is another disruption that's unfolding, which is electric vehicles. So with EVs coming in, do you see any more opportunities to enhance safety of these vehicles?
I think one thing that I would mention is every new segment evolving is a new opportunity for us, and I think we are very much prepared for addressing the electrified vehicles, both on the two-wheelers, which is the topic of the day, and also four-wheelers. So Continental is working, and it's not just my business, the vehicle dynamics, but also across Conti. When we talk of the sensorics division, then when we talk of the HMI division, where we make all the clusters. So everywhere we are working powertrain, we are working to see how we have preparedness for the electrified vehicle segments, and very much prepared to address those opportunities and technologies that will be required to meet the electric vehicle. So we are already engaged with a couple of opportunities, and I think in future we will see that when with adoption increasing on the electric two-wheelers, we will see technologies of Conti also coming in play.
Christian, connectivity is also increasingly becoming the buzzword. Even today with the mass market segment, we can see companies introducing these Bluetooth consoles and all these connectivity features on the conventionally powered two-wheelers as well. So what is the potential that connectivity offers from a safety perspective, and what could be the challenges that could come along?
Yeah, so I think another very important aspect that you bring in, Mayank, and over here, I think the topic is as connectivity in vehicles increases, then we also have to look at topics like cybersecurity. And I think over here, again, Continental has been working very strongly and much prepared how we handle the cybersecurity topics for the markets that we play in. So we have a Continental E-Horizon solution, which is a cloud-based data management service. And then we have also partners, both internal divisions of Conti as well as our third-party partners, that we work to see that for cybersecurity, so there are three things that we work in. So like we have Sense Plan Act as one of the topics for Continental Automotive. So here for cybersecurity, prevent, understand, and respond, these are the three buckets that we are working under the E-Horizon solution, which will take care of the cybersecurity topics.
Right. Christian, I think we are almost at the fag end of our conversation here. I'll just take a couple of questions that are coming in. There is one question from Mr. Ashish Kale, and he wants to understand, do you think features like dynamic damping control and e-call should be made mandatory, at least in the high-end two-wheeler segment, looking at the kind of Indian road conditions?
So, sorry, Mayank, say that again, the dynamic
Dynamic damping control and
yes,
emergency calling.
emergency call-in. I think I would say yes, we have definitely a clear focus on how we enhance safety, and then there are multiple segments in two-wheelers. So one is in the city driving, and then you also have performance driving, a very, very big segment. And then when you are doing off-roading, you are doing long drives, I think these functionalities will be much required to enhance the safety and help to the drivers. So I would see over time, definitely there will be needs, and these functionalities would be in discussion and coming in play. Yeah.
There's another question, and the gentleman wants to know, do you think autonomous emergency braking could also become a mandatory safety regulation in India?
This is for the two-wheelers we are talking, right? That's
Yes.
the week of the topic of the week. So I think we already said there is an emergency brake assist function that we would see coming. And then now we are talking of the AEB functionality, autonomous emergency braking. So what I would say is step by step, all these functions and safety features will definitely come in play. But again, India being a price sensitive market, and then we have to see whenever you get a new technology, how you commercialize that and service it to the mass market. Coming to niche segments, higher end bikes, etc., then of course some of these functions will come into play much earlier. But when we talk of the mass market, I think currently what we are seeing is how we get the net of ABS actually with the bigger segments, which is 100 cc, less than 125 cc. And thereafter, there are simpler topics, which are the drive modes. There are topics of RLP, and then the OCB, optimized curve braking. And thereafter, definitely, step by step, we will see in future also the autonomous emergency braking coming in play. But I would say right now to begin with only niche markets segment, which is of the higher end. Mass market will take some time.
Okay. Christian, one last question. As a flag bearer of safety, especially in the two-wheeler segment, do you think Continental as a tier one would be open to be part of a consortium wherein, multiple companies can come together and push forward this agenda for safety, like how you've seen, Global NCAP has been doing a lot of work, which has kind of increased the level of safety in case of passenger vehicles in India?
Uh, I would say very much yes, Mayank, and I think this is a topic where I already mentioned in the beginning that we work with NCAP, agencies like NCAP to drive the safety topics. In fact, a couple of years back in Noida, we had been partner to NCAP with the event which was engaging both two-wheelers and four-wheelers, a safety event NCAP had hosted. And I think we will be very much open to continue partnering with the industry forums and consortiums which are driving the safety topics, definitely.
Wonderful. On that very optimistic note, Christian, it was wonderful talking to you as always, and for giving us the right tone for the day ahead, and with some great insights on the fundamentals of two-wheeler safety when it comes from the technology side of the things. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you so much, Mayank. It was great talking with you, and I am very excited to see the opportunities unfolding in the Indian market with the two-wheeler safety. And we definitely continue working with our partners in the market. And I wish you also a great day ahead. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. With that, we move to our panel discussion. And I would like to invite Mr. Piyush Tiwari, founder and CEO, Save Life Foundation, a non-for-profit organization committed to saving lives on the Indian roads, and Mr. Uri Lavi, CEO and co-founder, Ride Vision, an Israel-based advanced rider assistance system solutions provider. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming.
I mean, thanks a lot.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Piyush, I would like to start off with you. Nobody knows data better than you. Over 56,000 people riding or sitting as a pillion on a two-wheeler were killed in India in 2019. So in your opinion, are two-wheelers the perpetrators in India, or are they the ones who are the vulnerable ones when we talk about all the motorists on the road in our country?
So, two-wheeler riders are absolutely, most certainly categorized as vulnerable road users, primarily because of the level of exposure that they have. In terms of establishing fault, we need to institute a system of forensic crash investigation to really determine who's at fault. Right now, traditionally, the police would come and find the bigger vehicle on the site and build a case against them. But what we are trying to do, at least on the roads where we are operating, is to institute a system of forensic investigation that will determine who's really at fault. So fault setting is not really the issue, but I think fundamentally, as you also mentioned, more than 35% of fatalities on our roads come from two-wheeler riders, right? And are suffered by two-wheeler riders. And that in itself is, should be ringing alarm bells everywhere. Whether we talk about crash testing, whether we talk about safety care, whether we talk about training. I think all of these are areas where, when it comes to two-wheelers, we've seen a significant amount of gaps, and a lot more work has to be done to address some of these areas.
Piyush, what are some of the major causes of accidents involving a two-wheeler on the Indian roads?
It's typically broken into three areas. One, of course, is human error, which we often talk about. It's overspeeding. It could be, we see a lot of zigzag driving by two-wheeler riders. We recently investigated a crash on the Yamuna Expressway where a two-wheeler rider rear-ended a truck, right? Primarily because of zigzag driving. And we don't see typically two-wheelers rear-ending heavy vehicles. But in this case, we saw that and we realized that it was primarily because of driving behavior. It could be drinking and driving. It could be now more increasingly mobile phone usage while riding a motorcycle or a two-wheeler. So these are some of the causal factors of crashes. But the important thing to talk about is what are the causal factors for injury. What we also see in terms of causal factors, something that I missed mentioning earlier, are the infrastructure issues. So in places like, recently it's been in news from Bangalore, for example, a number of motorcyclists were killed because of potholed roads, because of, challenges with the infrastructure. And then finally, the third issue is the vehicular, challenges that might exist. But coming back to the causal factors for injury, what we have seen is that while the causal factor for a crash might be spread across human, vehicular, and infrastructure issues, causal factor for injury is often almost always either vehicular or infrastructure. So we see that people will go and interact with road infrastructure or road furniture and get injured as a result of that, or they will go and interact with other vehicles on the road and get injured as a result of that. And that injury could lead to fatality as well. So primarily, that's what we have seen in terms of the spectrum of causal factors that contribute to two-wheeler rider fatalities in our country.
Right. I would like to come to Mr. Lavi. Mr. Lavi, you've come into an agreement with India's Spark Minda Group to supply your rider assistance systems, in the country. So you have studied the Indian market too. So what differences do you see when you compare the riding behavior on India's roads compared to some developed markets overseas?
Thank you. So maybe just before quickly answering this question, let me connect the dots between the previous discussion and the current statement. I think it's actually truly that once you engage in some sort of accident, if you make the infrastructure, because you're in such an exposed vehicle, then that accident could be fatal. So it's a really, very logical statement, right? And hence it's very important to also talk about safety, not only within the vehicle, like the ABSs, and actually bring the safety that tries to understand the environment and alert the riders before the potential accidents could happen. And this is very important, and it's common between India, China, Europe, and US. The moment we understand that we can prevent the accident before it happens, that's the moment that we can reduce injuries and also fatalities, whether they're within the vehicle or outside of the vehicle, which will happen in more cases for two-wheelers. In terms of your question, the differences, I would say, as everybody knows, India is a very, very cost-effective market. It's a scale market and it's a very cost-effective market. And that's why Right Vision understood immediately that in order to bring a very cost-effective solution of such a great innovation, we need to partner with a really good tier one, such as Minda Corporation. And we want to localize every potential bit of manufacturing and supply chain in order to create a solution that will be applicable to the market. The other thing that I would say, which is a bit surprising, because people will say, well, look, Indian traffic is crazy. How you can even do something like that? And my answer, honestly, if you analyze the patterns, how the two-wheelers in the world are actually being used, mostly, starting with the commuting segment or last mile delivery segment, going to some leisure, but again, they have all that maneuverability of zigzagging, coming close to the vehicles, between the vehicles, and so on. And if you build a solution and technology that really understands that pattern, that's the same pattern that you will have in India, even in more congested environment. So surprisingly, though you may say that the Indian traffic is more problematic, and truly it is, then the core implementation of understanding the maneuverability of the two-wheeler is the same. If you know how to crack it and you know how to build it, then you can bring that innovation to India as well.
So Mr. Lavi, you are building such solutions for the Indian market, and are you facing some really critical challenges in doing that?
No, so we actually live in a very, very, very good background, because we already have a solution, commercially available solution that is available in Europe and in the US. And we're also working with manufacturers in Europe and some other tier ones in Europe in order to bring this solution inside the OE. So we basically know exactly what needs to be done in order to customize and bring that cost-effective solution to India. So now we're just in the process of customization, and we really wish to hit the market early 2023. So it's really just around the corner.
Right. Even if you, I'll just be with you for one more question before I move to Piyush again. Even if you bring a cost-effective solution for India, do you think that without having any regulatory push, there will be still adoption of those solutions?
Well, that's a great question. So I definitely think that regulation will be there down the road, as it happened with the ABSs. But what I will say is that I think at the market level, when you analyze the products, you see more or less the same products in the same categories. So the OEMs are competing more or less with the same features. The Right Vision solution manufactured by Minda locally is the differentiating factor that an OEM can add and really push down and bring lots of new functionalities to the biker. It starts with the safety then, but easy can expand to connectivity, to evidence recording, and so on and so on. So I think that will be the main factor to bring the product to the market.
Right. So offering safety as a differentiating feature for your product is what you're saying will make sense going forward.
Correct.
Right. Piyush, coming back to you, you've worked extensively on highways and expressways in India. So if you can shed some light on the kind of black spots, you mentioned infrastructure as a causal factor for all these accidents and fatalities on our roads. So what are some of the black spots that you see on Indian roads, especially from a two-wheeler rider's perspective?
Sure. One of the big challenge with two-wheelers is the very aspect of balance, right? As compared to light motor vehicles and so on and so forth. So relatively, it's tougher to balance a two-wheeler. And if there is, if there are surface issues on the road, or if there are, even interactions with other road users, it becomes a challenge to balance, and that causes a crash and then eventually an injury. In terms of black spots, we've seen quite a bit. We're currently operating on close to 10,000 kilometers of roads across the country. But the one that stands out, the one type of black spot that stands out are the ones where the highways meet some sort of settlement, some sort of built up areas, as we call them, as we go along highways, because that's where you see a significant amount of two-wheeler traffic and two-wheelers getting into the highway mix and so on and so forth. So those are the areas where we see a lot more conflict, as we call it. Very recently in Delhi, we picked up on National Highway 9 the Bhalaswa intersection, which had become really a death trap for a lot of two-wheeler riders, because there were a lot of engineering issues at that space. We found that the rotary was not working properly under the flyover. We found that vehicles were allowed to enter at almost a 90-degree angle into the rotary and don't get rotated, but actually go straight out, which was increasing the amount of conflict that was there, and a significant amount of pedestrian traffic and so on and so forth. And after studying the issue, after understanding what was going on, we redesigned that entire intersection, which has now eliminated fatalities from that black spot 100%. So we've not seen any fatalities at that spot post the intervention. So the point I'm trying to make is that we do see many of these infrastructure issues on highways, on city roads, but most of them are fixable. Most of them are easily correctable. And I think it's some level of design thinking and some level of effort that is required to fix some of these issues. But if you ask me what are the key contributing factors, what makes a specific place a black spot, I would say that the other big reason is the misplacement of road furniture. So we have seen that oftentimes construction zones are not marked properly. We see a lot of exposed concrete structures that contribute to sudden crashes. We see sudden appearance of a concrete median where somebody may not be expecting it, and they'll hit it and then they'll get injured as a result of that. So that's fundamentally what leads to a large amount of black spot kind of designation in these areas.
So Piyush, you mentioned that these are ideally fixable things. You can just get them fixed. They're not major challenges. But what's the response like when you report these issues to the authorities? So what's the response? How long does it take? And what's your feedback like for how long you've been working in India?
We've been lucky to be able to work with officials who are fairly responsive. Of course, the government systems take time to approve, to respond, and so on and so forth. But we've largely seen that at the level of decision makers, these issues are fairly well accepted. For example, we are looking at some interventions in Nagpur city, from where the Honorable Minister of Road Transport and Highways is also a member of Parliament. And we saw, despite his schedule and despite his many other responsibilities, we saw a very personal level of involvement in ensuring that we get access, ensuring that we are able to study the black spots, study the intersections that were problematic, and start some interventions there. So I would say that while the decision-making level is very keen to fix some of these things, the age-old processes of the government oftentimes take time to allow any kind of intervention. So it often takes us 6 to 9 months after we have informed what the solution could be to get a permission to actually go ahead and intervene in some of these areas. So it is a bit challenging, but not entirely. It's not like we get complete opposition or we are shut down. I think there's a lot of openness now. When I started back in 2008, it was very different. But I think thanks to many initiatives like this very one where we are speaking, I think mainstreaming of the issue has happened. So there's a lot more appreciation than what there was, maybe 13, 14 years ago.
Right. So a lot more awareness and overall, making it a buzz in the overall Indian society, safety of the roads. So yeah. One more question, do we also have a robust quick response mechanism on the roads in India?
Technically, every highway in the country has ambulances available. Technically, many cities have an ambulance response service, right? But I would go several layers deeper to determine whether it is an effective response or not. It might arrive very quickly, but is it actually able to intervene in the process of saving life, or is it just transporting people to hospital? And then what is happening at the hospital, and so on and so forth. So we call this a chain of survival. Do people have access to care? Are they able to call an easy to remember number? While they're waiting for help, are there bystanders that are assisting them freely without any fear of any kind of legal repercussions and so on and so forth? So for that, we have the Good Samaritan law now. Then once the ambulance arrives, is it just a transportation vehicle or is it actually a intervention vehicle? And then you go beyond that to say that once the transfer is happening, what are the care protocols? Once the transfer has happened to the hospital, how is the hospital receiving and ensuring care? So it's not just one aspect of this that will help save a life. It's all of this entire chain coming together that will ensure that the life that is in peril is actually saved. And what we find is that this chain of survival is largely fractured in most parts of the country. 99% is what I would say. Some places might have a great ambulance service, but then the hospital response is lacking. Some places might have a great ambulance and hospital, but they will not have protections for Good Samaritans who will eventually trigger that system, right? So there are various challenges that exist in this chain. And what we really need, as we have seen in many countries, including in Israel, is that we need a comprehensive framework for trauma care. We need certain laws to be passed that will allow the comprehensive framework to be created, and not just one Supreme Court judgment here, one section of the law here and there. I think we need a Right to Emergency Care Act, which will actually ensure lives being saved.
Right. Piyush, you mentioned about the Good Samaritan law. I'll come back to you on that. I'll go to Mr. Lavi. Mr. Lavi, do you think that things like an e-call alert system can be of great help in this case? And if so, then how do we brace the infrastructure on the Indian roads?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the whole supply chain, as was mentioned, because you first start with a very simplistic emergency call that is implemented on the vehicle level. Of course, moving aside from potential false alerts and so on, let's assume it's operating correctly. But once it's there, you don't need to remember a phone number to call. You don't need to remember what to do. It's been issued almost automatically. And then the second piece, which is also interesting, is whether we can actually give some data to the first responders to respond correctly. So for example, if Right Vision understands accelerations and potential braking situations and forces that have been involved and directions and so on, we can estimate the impact. So the first responder comes already with some knowledge what to do. It doesn't need to waste the time to analyze the situation. And then, of course, what is the easiest way to get to the first medical care, center? Who is going to take, which kind of ER is open and can take the patient? So all this needs to be baked first in terms of the vehicle, then the implementation of the medical center that receives the patient, and so on and so on. I think that could increase greatly any potential country, and especially in India.
And do you think, Mr. Lavi, that the adoption of these high-tech solutions would become much easier when we move towards electric two-wheelers?
Well, in fact, I think that EVs will create even more demand, and I will explain. I mean, in terms of the internal combustion engine, when you operate such a vehicle, at least it makes some noise and people are used to it, and at least they pay attention to some degree. Whether it's good or not, we can argue. But once you move to EVs, it becomes a very quiet implementation. And if it's a quiet implementation, it becomes harder to understand the environment and understand who's there and what he's doing, where he's going. And in that sense, here, those technologies are even more important. So starting from the ARIS solutions, from the advanced rider assistance systems, then going to the emergency calls if something happens, and so on and so on. So yes, absolutely.
Could we also look at some of the very small and simple solutions, like you mentioned, that an electric two-wheeler will be completely silent, so everyone around it might not even notice it coming. So any very basic solutions that OEMs might look at?
Yeah, I'll give you one example, which we actually see a huge pull from the market, as Right Vision and Minda, they're on the ground. So we have OEMs coming in and asking for us to bring the blind spot detection solution to the market. And the reason to that, as you obviously know, is once you ride, it's very hard to see what happens from behind, especially in the exposed environment. Sometimes it's noisy, sometimes it's, you're being obstructed by looking at another area. So blind spot detection is a very simple solution in terms of implementation. Not so simple once you encounter the maneuverability of the bike and the congested traffic and so on. But in terms of functionality or product-wise, it's a very simple solution to add to the bike. And there is real good pull from the market to try and bring that, because once everything becomes quieter, then those solutions will be even more important. The biker will need to be notified on potential vehicles that overtaking or seeing at the blind spot and could create a potential collision with the bike.
And Mr. Lavi, could you give us a trajectory of how the cost of these solutions would move in the coming future? Because all these, even though they're simple, they're very electronic intensive solutions. So they're not really the most affordable technologies at this point. So how do you see the cost coming down over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is that there are two main forces that will need to happen. First, as we know, it is the economy of scale. So as you scale on a volume basis, you can really achieve a lot of optimizations from the local supply chain, local manufacturing, local support and integration to the OEM, and that pushes down the prices. The second piece is that as you continue to evolve, it's correct that the current situation, as you mentioned before in your previous discussion, the current situation on the chips market is really, really problematic, but that's not going to continue. In fact, if it's going to continue, the entire market is going to be in a huge problem, not only in India, but around the globe. And we do anticipate that will change in about, hopefully in a year. And as time flies, I think the electronics actually becomes cheaper from the perspective of 5 to 10 years, period. So if you marry those two forces of continue to localize and volume-based approach on localization and the time that creates the electronics cheaper and cheaper, then you have very good cost-effective solution that can be applicable for the entire mass market.
Right. Piyush, I'll come back to you. Would you agree with what Mr. Lavi has just mentioned that, as a first respondent I'm talking about Save Life Foundation in most of the cases. So would data really help you in terms of giving the best, the first, response to the at the accident site when you go to such a site after an accident?
Yeah, I think data is very critical to be able to prevent such crashes in the future. And I'm very happy that such technologies are being introduced in the country, because when it comes to two-wheeler riders, it's been a largely ignored segment when it comes to safety. We are satisfied with ABS, for example, and that's about it. So I think there is a significant need to bring in and introduce newer technologies, newer safety measures. There's no crash testing of Indian two-wheeler, two-wheelers as such. So we need to get global NCAP to doing some level of crash testing for that. We need to introduce crash avoidance systems. We need to introduce, especially, a lot of people, from poorer backgrounds or economically vulnerable backgrounds, ride motorcycles even for long distances because of lack of access to public transport and other facilities. And so we need crash avoidance systems. We need fatigue detection systems for these vehicles as well, and not just talk about cars, which are only 17% of the crash, the fatal crashes, as opposed to 37% of two-wheeler riders. So I think there is, it's now time for us to really ask for these things, and there is. I think some level of effort will be required to educate the public that these things are important, and to generate some level of ask from the public as well, and ensure that these things are brought in. So I mean, we've been urging to the motor vehicle departments across the country, and as well as to Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, to create a dedicated kind of focus on two-wheeler rider safety, because there is from an equipment standpoint, and there is a significant need on that. The other challenge is, of course, around enforcement. How do you get the enforcement piece addressed? How do you ensure that helmets that are meant to save lives are appreciated? We have cities where there is mass violation of helmet laws, and the police can't do anything about that. So I think there is it's a combination of engineering technology, combination of education, combination of enforcement, and improved trauma care that will ensure that this huge number of 37% comes down over the next 3 to 4 years, if India has to meet its commitment of the Stockholm Declaration of reducing deaths by 50% by 2030. So it is a significant effort that will be required to achieve that.
Right. Piyush, what response do you receive from the government when you ask them, that they really need to focus on two-wheeler safety as a separate, entity in itself? So what response are you seeing, and, going forward, what can be expected in terms of regulations?
Yeah, so one of the good things that is happening is that very recently the government has started focusing on safety of children in that are riding two-wheelers, not driving but riding. So including small children who typically in India are seen exposed, even if their parents are wearing helmets, the child typically is not secure and is not wearing a helmet, and so on and so forth. So we've seen some action on that, which has been encouraging. There have been discussions on getting newer technologies, newer safety measures in. But traditionally, how public policy works is to actually bring everyone together and consult and get arrive at some sort of a consensus. And I think that process of consensus building has to start at some level, where the industry needs to be brought in. The healthcare and insurance has to be brought in, non-profits and other public interest groups have to be brought in, and I think there has to be some level of consensus built that there is proactive action, or at least now immediate action that is required to address these challenges. So while there have been some improvements, we are seeing even the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act of 2019, there have been certain provisions, new provisions introduced for two-wheeler rider safety, including strengthening licensing mechanisms to ensure that there isn't any gap there. But there is still a significant amount of work required. The one thing that that I feel that state governments can do on their own, and they don't have to wait for the union government, is that while we see a lot of training for car drivers and perhaps even truck drivers, we barely see any training for two-wheeler riders, right? So most two-wheeler riders in India have learned to drive their motorcycle or their scooter at home. And therefore, while they know how to operate the vehicle, they have absolutely no clue of the safety, aspects of safe, of driving. Things like what Uri mentioned about blind spots, right? Not many people know what the 3-second rule is, how many blind spots are there, what the 65-yard rule is. So I think there is an effort required to train motorcycle drivers. A lot of companies like Amazon, Ola, Swiggy, Zomato, they have hundreds of thousands of drivers on the roads. So it's also a corporate responsibility aspect to get these drivers better trained, and not just allow them to get on the roads with the limited amount of knowledge and limited amount of skills that they might have.
That's a very good thought, Piyush, and I would also like to take that to Uri. But the thing is, do you think as an organization, as a non-for-profit, are you also engaging with some of these startups? You mentioned Zomato, Swiggy, and all these who have like thousands of riders in metro cities who are like also under the pressure of doing a quick delivery. So have you at Save Life Foundations and also tried to approach these companies to start a program, perhaps?
Well, we work with certain food delivery organizations, not specifically with Zomato and Swiggy, but I think Our experience with that has been that the companies have to be open to sparing the drivers for half a day at least. They should compensate them for that loss, because most of these are coming from very, very vulnerable backgrounds, very, very poor backgrounds. And unless that happens, no matter what sort of a program we put together, people will simply not come for it. They have to offer insurance to them, for example. So I think to a large extent, it goes back to the aspect of corporate responsibility. And while nonprofits like ours are happy to provide our advice and services on how some of these things can be done, but I think it's a matter of value system also. I think unless safety is part of your core value system, like some companies have, you won't be able to really commit yourself to something like this. So I think there is a shift required in the way we think also.
That's absolutely true, Piyush. I totally agree there. Mr. Lavi, I would take what Piyush has just mentioned to you. Do you think technology could also play a part in training the riders to ride better on the roads?
Yes, it's a big yes, because in fact, that's already happening. So on the ride vision side, when we talk about I would say the current premium product that we have, which is Ride Vision 1, it's a big product that has tons of features from safety perspective, from potential forward collisions, blind spots, dangerous overtakes, distance keepings. Then we also have an ability to calculate a risk, or calculate the biker score. And this biker score basically allows us to understand the training, the basic training of this rider. And we can help, and we can tell to the organization, to the fleet operators, hey, you know what, pay attention. This rider is really, he needs to be more trained. He needs to be maybe spend more time explaining how to do things, because we see the behavior on the road and the way how the rider addresses all the potential challenges, especially from the safety perspective. So absolutely, calculating that biker score and use that in order to retrain employees or retrain a biker is something that the government or fleet operator can consider.
So going forward, when we talk about the India market, Mr. Lavi, do you think there is potential for these fleet operators to adopt such solutions? Because, again, the end question that arises is the cost. So do you think they would be willing to adopt these technologies to improve their overall business?
You know what? I think they will, and I will explain why. Because it actually goes to the cost. Currently, they have a huge cost because they have huge liabilities in terms of commercial liabilities for the insurance companies. And in fact, we're already engaged with different fleet operators because they understand, of course, there's the safety of their bikers and their employees, but there is also a lot of cost involved of operating those vehicles. Accidents and repairs and fixing of those vehicles, but also the commercial abilities of the insurance companies. So once you introduce solutions such as Ride Vision, such as advanced rider assistance systems, you can go ahead and reduce the cost on the potential repairs of vehicles, as well as the commercial liabilities and insurance costs that you pay in order to run all those big fleets. So in my opinion, it goes hand with hand with reduction and giving them more option also for safety for their employees.
Right. One more aspect that I want to touch upon is, the regulatory part of the entire technology gamut of solutions that you're bringing. So in your case, when you talk about bringing collision avoidance technology, so do you think that there could be any regulatory hindrances in India that might limit your potential?
No, on the contrary. So at this point, what we're talking right now is an assistance system. So we're not touching right now, we're not intervening the vehicle at this point. Any potential discussion about emergency intervention systems in the two-wheeler will need to be done carefully, because as we know, these are only two wheels. And in order to intervene, you need to do it properly. There is a secret sauce how to do it, but it's not going to be a simple brake like we are used in the passenger cars. Otherwise, we will catapult the rider outside of the bike, and we will end up with what we tried to prevent initially. So at this point, we're talking about assistance systems. And as such, obviously, the more we can give, the more we can provide, and that will reduce potential accidents, the merrier it will be. And going forward, I think that actually regulators will be involved in order to demand those systems, and that will basically, with the industry, regulate the proper solution that will be used on the local market.
Sure. Piyush, coming to you, it was your efforts that we got the Good Samaritan law in India. But still, do you think that people are really hesitant in helping somebody out there who's been involved in a fatal crash on the road?
Well, the Good Samaritan law was first instituted by the Supreme Court in 2016 following our petition. And then we worked with the Government of India to include that in the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, and the law was called out in that. And so it's now implementable across the country, and the rules have also been released around that. So it's a very recent kind of an institution overall. And one challenge has been that, how do you tell a country of 1.3 billion people that they have a new right? So I think that communication challenge remains. But what we have seen is that we had conducted a survey back in 2019 to a national survey to understand what the difference in people's perspectives is between 2012 when we moved the Supreme Court, and 2019, by which time it had been incorporated into the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act. And we saw a significant jump in people's confidence, at least in terms of coming forward and helping the injured. What is happening in terms of implementation is that a number of states have introduced Good Samaritan schemes, where they are recognizing and in some cases even rewarding Good Samaritans who come forward to help the injured. I think that's a great move, because it even to the courts, it tells that these are individuals who are who have been saviors in that setup, and should not be subjected to any kind of prolonged procedures, so to say, which was one of the impediments to bystander care in the country. So my sense is that it will take another 2 or 3 years for the law to be fully implemented in the country, by which time we are hoping that people will learn more about this and so on and so forth. But we need, at a enterprise level, at an industrial level maybe, an initiative to train people how to help the injured, right? Uri, would know, Israel has a amazing system of, citizen first responders, right? Under United Hatzalah and other initiatives that are there. Where citizens are trained in basic trauma care to be able to help, other citizens. So when I founded Save Life, we started training citizens, and then we realized that the challenge was with the framework, because you can give them the skill, but you can't give them confidence, because the law was such that it was creating an impediment for people. Now that the law has come, the time has come for us to really launch a massive nationwide exercise to start training people to help the injured. And India, being a country that faces disproportionate amount of natural calamities, industrial accidents. Of course, we are number one in road crash fatalities. We need to have citizenry that is well trained in at least basic response, and that training will also help them save their own lives, in many of these situations, and enhance appreciation for safety overall. So that is an area where we feel a significant effort is required, and not just a one agency, but perhaps public-private partnership that can really take this forward, and really have citizens who can be trained, and then we can connect them through a mobile platform to ensure that they're actually available to assist and are invoked, and not just are trained and let be. So that effort is needed. But I think the awareness part is improving as we go along.
So where do you really intercept, Piyush? Because you mentioned that some states are giving these Good Samaritan schemes. In Delhi, I had seen Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal coming on the radio and announcing that you don't need to hesitate if you see somebody on the road, and you can just straight away go and help them.
Yeah.
And also in some cases the traffic police has been engaging with students, I mean school kids, at the very basic the fundamental level. So where do we intercept so that it makes the best use of that?
Yeah, at the end of the day, and if we try and connect the topic with the aspect of younger drivers, we see children starting to drive to their schools on motorized two-wheelers, as early as grade 9 or 10, right, and without proper training, without proper safety gear, and so on and so forth. I think a once in a while workshop with the traffic police doesn't help anybody. I think it makes up for good PR for the police, but that's about it. I think what we need is an institutional setup where children are, if we're serious about training children, then we need to make it part of the curriculum, or make it at least part of the the extracurricular activities in school. It can't be an eyewash sort of a event, which is how most of these workshops are. And of course, we can't expect the police to do this at a high scale, because it's not their job fundamentally, right? They can contribute to development of the curriculum, but I think there is so the intervention needs to happen at a serious level. And I'm using the word serious very consciously, is because we see a lot of stuff happening around road safety in the country at a surface level. And especially when we talk about awareness and training and so on and so forth. So I think unless institutional mechanisms are put together, unless there is some serious level of intervention taken on, this issue will not get addressed as decisively as we want it to get addressed.
Right. Mr. Lavi, what Piyush just mentioned, basic awareness or the fundamental behavior of a rider on a two-wheeler. So do you think, even though we could come up with the best of the technological solutions, if we don't have that basic behavioral change in ourselves, in how to do safe riding on the roads, nothing could really work. So India as a country, do you think we could learn something from countries like Israel when it comes to these fundamental things?
Surprisingly, when you analyze the accidents for the two-wheelers, you will find the same patterns. And you will see that even here in Israel, though we do have the basic training, people are still lacking the advanced training. And the same goes to Europe, and the same goes to North America. So it's surprising. And I so agree to that point that people need to be trained, because, hey guys, we can't do anything in the world without a proper training. Really, when you try to operate a vehicle and you misunderstand the situation, you don't know how to look and analyze the situation, and you do not apply your current speed towards the situation, then obviously accidents will happen. So I think it's very imperative for everybody, any country, actually to invest in that advanced trainings, riding trainings. And I think coming back to that behavior of the rider, score behavior, is very important in order to use that as the base tool to assess who needs that right now, who will need it later, or who actually behaves very well and then has a minimum risk.
Could we also adopt things like having a differentiated license system, maybe a different license for somebody who's going to be riding a motorcycle or a scooter below a certain cc of engine capacity, and a different one for the other?
Yes, absolutely. We do have that, and it's the same for Europe and the US. So there are 3 types of different licenses, and each and every one requires some basic training and also examination. So really advanced, and also some age restrictions. As you're younger, you may be a little bit more reckless, and hence there are some age restrictions in that area as well. So absolutely, I think it's a good idea. If you do it properly, it can minimize the potential of accidents.
Piyush, do you think that's viable for a country like India to do that?
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to also bring the example of Singapore, where they have a Singapore Safety Driving Center, which is essentially a multi-storied facility, because they have such paucity of land, and which is a very similar scenario as our cities, where there's paucity of land and there's so much built up area that you can't afford to have a ground for training. But what they have done is that they have created multi-level, like we have multi-level parkings, they create a multi-level training facility where two-wheeler riders are trained. And one of the things that Singapore has done is that when it comes to licensing, as Uri also mentioned, that the more complex the vehicle gets, the levels of licensing changes, the level of training as well as licensing changes. So if you are dealing with a 50 to 100 cc vehicle, it's a basic license that you will get. But the moment your cc starts increasing and you eventually hit a super bike, you will be required to undergo specific training and a specific kind of licensing from that perspective. Now, I don't think that level of complexity is required or even possible in India at this point of time. But I think what we can certainly do is to incentivize the auto industry to set up these facilities as a core business, not as CSR, because it will be revenue generating. They already have the facilities. They already have knowledge of robotics and on knowledge of they can set up a hydraulic based training system and so on and so forth. So there is that's a group that's a sector that has the capacity to do this, provided we give them certain benefits, certain develop training as a subsector of the automobile sector, and which is a revenue generating profitable sector for them to work on. So I think there is a big need for it, and there is a way to do it, which is through this system. The other thing to do is that we have IDTRs now in most states, which is the Institute of Driver Training and Research, which is funded by the government of India and as well as by state governments jointly. We need them to have there to be a hub and spoke model for that. So the IDTR can serve as a hub, and you have within the city or within the district multiple spokes that conduct affiliated training for two-wheeler riders also, and not just for heavy or light motor vehicles overall. So there is, I think structurally it is possible. Somebody has to bell the cat. I think that initiative either will have to come from the industry or from the government, overall, and ensure that this is implemented.
Right. In terms of IDTRs, Piyush, we've also seen some sort of a participation from OEMs as well. So going forward, like you mentioned that they could operate these institutions of training as their core business. So would they be really willing to do that?
I don't see why, because it's attracting a potential customer to you, to actually ride your your equipment while getting trained. So if nothing else, it can come out of the marketing budget to begin with as a startup cost, and then so I don't see why that they shouldn't do it. I think the way we need to support the industry is perhaps to either make the motorcycle test a little more rigorous, so people themselves go to one of these centers to get trained, or make it mandatory to get trained and have a certificate when you apply for a license. So either of these things will ensure that there is a regular supply of participants and trainees for these institutions, and which will most certainly overall help everybody also. When it comes to the lower economic categories, we can provide, the government could bring on, could provide certain, incentives, could, the industry also, for example, hypothetically, if Amazon says that if you are a certified rider, you will get an X amount extra as part of your income that you get from Amazon as a delivery person, right? So I think there are ways and means of ensuring that even if people are spending money on training, they're able to recover that through a better livelihood or some sort of an incentive from the industry or the government.
Right. So technology, in a sense, is going to play a very key role in making this entire transition towards a very safe ecosystem on our roads. Talking about technology, I would like to take a few questions here. We're almost at the fag end of our discussion. Ori, this one is for you. This Mr. K. Mohan is mentioning that in Indian cars we have this speed limit audio voice. There's at 80 kilometers per hour, there's a little beep that comes in, and after 120 kph, there's a constant beeping that happens. So do you think something like that is possible in case of two-wheelers as well?
It's possible. I think it's not going to be adopted or adopted quickly, in my opinion, in the Indian market. And I will just explain why, because this is more about actually integrating navigation systems inside the bike and really understanding what kind of speed limits are there. because from the traffic sign perspective, they are lacking, or some that are being hit and not exist. It's the infrastructure issue. And hence, I think this is less desirable functionality, because eventually, if you have a potential forward collision alert, obviously the speed needs to be retained towards the local environment, and you really need to use the speed according to what is there on the road. But once you have the forward collision, that can obviously eliminate a lot of issues that could happen from a potential forward collision. So integrating that technology, which is a speed limit recognition, I would say it's possible. In my opinion, a bit more cumbersome at this point on Indian level.
Right. Uri, any specific advanced technologies that India could adopt from developed markets? This is the question coming from Mr. Pratik Soni.
Yes, absolutely. So if I analyze the statistical data coming from India, and I'm not the expert, you have the other expert here on the panel, but if I analyze that, then statistically, number one will be blind spot detection, and the second one will be forward collision. Eventually, situation happening when somebody surprises us and we are just about to change our trajectory and we're being hit, or we are not understanding the environment, we're dealing with some other areas and we just collide in the frontal area. So those two will be the main to be adopted, and in my opinion, they will address the majority of vehicle-to-vehicle collision, whether it's a motorbike with a motorbike or a motorbike vs any other vehicle. That will address the majority of accidents that are there.
Right. Piyush, coming to you, there's a question that's come in. Should metros in India follow the example of some European cities where cars and trucks are being sought to be kept off the roads? And will this enhance safety of two-wheeler riders on Indian roads?
I think one of the challenges that has been with us is that we followed the Western model quite too much in our road development process. And I think if we continue to do that, even for keeping our people safe, we will be missing out on a lot of the cultural and local nuances that exist in India. We've already created roads just for cars, and two-wheeler riders and pedestrians and cyclists are almost always sidelined. So I think there is a need to rethink some of that infrastructure aspect, especially. But when it comes to what can be done to keep them safe, I think what we have demonstrated through what is called tactical urbanism trials is that even with limited infrastructure, you can create safe spaces for pretty much all road users that operate on the roads. You don't have to exclude anybody. And how many are we going to exclude? When we talk about the European or the US model, there are about 20 to 25 types of road users. India has more than 70 types of road users, right? So there is that local nuance that has to be considered when we look at some of these issues. But there are solutions under development. Like I said, tactical urbanism is helping us find some of those or address some of those challenges overall. And I'm pretty confident that without excluding any particular kind of road user, we should be able to create safe spaces for all.
And is multimodal transportation also going to play its part in enhancing the overall safety when you talk about commuting within cities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think time has come for us to establish multimodal, facilities or integration more so, which is quite critical. So we do need to have a system where people have a seamless transfer from one mode to the other. The challenge oftentimes is the last mile connectivity. That how do you connect to the multimodal system in the first place, and what happens around the multimodal system that we are talking about, that specific area in terms of safety. So there is some work required on that front, but multimodal overall will most certainly help in creating safer roads and a safer transition from one mode to the other.
Right. Gentlemen, we're almost running out of time. I would like to conclude with just one last thought from both of you. Where do you see the safety quotient of India's two-wheeler population over the next 5 years? And, what are going to be the key enablers for that? Piyush, you want to go first?
Sure. I definitely see things improving, primarily because there's a significant amount of interest, both from the government, the private sector, but also from the civil society to address this problem decisively. And I think given the fact that we've aligned ourselves to a particular goal, which is to reduce deaths in India by 50% at least over the next 6 to 7 years, there is going to be some effort that will be put in that direction. So I'm very hopeful that things will change in this area, that we will be able to save lives. What it will take fundamentally is a combination of top-down approach, which is the policy framework aspect, and we have to relook at it and see what are the gaps there that need to be filled, and the bottom-up approach, which is that what do we need to do on the ground to make to be able to save lives? Is there infrastructure redesign that we have to consider specifically? Is there better emergency services that we have to do overall? And finally, the third thing that will help is the integration of these two and our ability to keep up with technology and keep up with newer innovations that are happening in this space. So I think a combination of this will help, but it will most certainly kind of unravel itself, and we will see some improvements in this area.
Great. Mr. Lavi, your thoughts, please.
Yes, I will finish with a little bit of optimistic, I think, thoughts, because I believe, excuse me, I believe that India is actually innovating and moving towards lots of safety implementations, and you can see it in adoption of mandatory ABSs and CBSs, and hopefully now pushing that down to a lower CC, and then bringing Euro 5, Euro NCAP. So all these mechanisms that have been applied is actually innovation that happens. And the sheer fact that there's a pull demand from the market for the advanced rider assistance systems, such as blind spot detection, forward collision, and so on, that just proves that there is an understanding from the OEM side, even the OEM side, that it's an important matter. We need to bring it to the mass market. And once it's happening, I think that will steer the initial adoption. Of course, it will take some time, but the initial adoption. And then once we bring, again, the governmental efforts that also I have seen involved in thinking about reducing the accidents, I think that will converge together. And in my opinion, it will bring more solutions that eventually will impact lives. And I hope it will impact lives and save lives.
Wonderful, wonderful. With that, we've completely run out of time for this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Lavi. Thank you, Piyush, for your very insightful thoughts and talking about how it's very important for the convergence of technologies, regulations, as well as a change in the driving behavior in order to improve the overall safety of two-wheeler riders on the Indian roads. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mayank. Thanks a lot. Always a pleasure to engage with Autocar.
Thank you. With that, I would now like to hand it over to Mr. Nilesh Wadhwa, my colleague, to take it forward for the technical presentation sessions for the day. Nilesh, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you, Mr. Lavi. Thank you, Mr. Piyush Tiwari. It was indeed a very interesting and insightful panel session where safety, which is a paramount subject when it comes to two-wheelers in India, we cannot talk about, we cannot rule talking about safety without the two-wheeler segment without talking about safety. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Sripath Tokekar for the first technical session. We have, the first technical presentation is from Dassault Systems. It is on improving motorcycle driving experience through realistic simulation. Mr. Tokekar will be taking over this presentation, and he'll be going through and sharing his thoughts and insights on the same. He is an industry process consultant, senior manager with Dassault Systems. He has been working over 13 years with the company. He has worked with various industry. Let me just speak. Sripath has been working with various customers across industries to deploy industry best processes for simulation. In his current role as industry process consultant senior manager, he is leading a team of experts from various domains such as structure, fluids, EM, EMAC, MBS, and optimization. He has a keen understanding of the industry processes and deploys simulation best practices. In his curriculum, he holds a master's degree MTech from IIT Delhi in applied mechanics. Before I hand it over to Mr. Shripad, I'll request our audience to kindly share their questions and queries in the chat box. We will try to take them up one by one at the end of the presentation. Mr. Shripad, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Nilesh, and very good morning to all our viewers. Thanks, Autocar Professional, for giving us an opportunity to present, especially on the two-wheeler segment. And today's, I hope my screen is visible, right, Nilesh? So
yes, we can view it.
So today I would, next half an hour or so, I'll talk on the improving motorcycle riding experience through realistic simulations. And based on the topic, you would have understood that, I'm going to talk about the simulations and its usage in the two-wheeler industry and how that could help in terms of improving the riding experience of the two-wheeler. When it comes to the riding experience, we all know it constitutes various aspects of it. And one of the panel discussions we were just now finished, which we were talking about the safety of the rider, etc. But along with the safety, there are a lot of other aspects. It also depends on the type of motorcycle segment itself. For an example, if I am looking at off-roading, then I may look at rugged motorcycle with a lot of durability, strength, etc. But when I'm looking at the scooter segment, maybe I'm looking at a very nice ride, etc. So it's mixed. Every time we need to look at this riding experience because users are very touchy about their motorcycles. When I bought my first motorcycle, I looked at a lot of aspects. It should be funky in design. It should have very good dynamics and so on. So every user has its own test. And of course, as an OEM, to manage all of these things is a very big challenge. So in order to do that, I'm looking at how these expectations from the users or the customers translates into the engineering targets. Because ultimately, when I'm looking at the better dynamics of the vehicle or safety, it ultimately translates into the engineering targets, I would say the challenges, and we have a lot of many constraints to achieve that. So it could include the performance targets, emissions target, safety, how do I validate my results, innovative designs, the shapes of the vehicles or the motorcycles changing every day. You are seeing a lot of new type of the motorcycles coming in with the nice shapes, etc. With that, the the fuel economy or the aerodynamics performance, all of these things comes in picture, and then balancing of these things. Of course, the competitive trade-offs, and all this put a lot of pressure on the OEMs to innovate the designs, at the same time meeting all the constraints and the targets that they have. So I would here pause a little bit and play a small video which could highlight the glimpse of how simulations can target all of these areas. And of course, these are all a lot of areas. So today I will touch upon some of these areas in my coming slides, but I just wanted to give a brief overview on this through this video. I'm sure you will be able to hear the audio as well. So what we are seeing, there are a lot of performance areas that we are targeting today, which constitutes my ride experience. The major one is, I would say, the aerodynamics performance, then the thermal management, then I am also looking at noise aspects, airflow, exhausts, and of course the structural strength and the advancements related to that. because we need to manage all of these things at a light level. Yeah, so there are a lot of aspects, what you have seen in the video, which constitutes your lot of engineering KPIs and ultimately translates into your ride experience as well. So the first area what we looked at, and I'll go over these areas very quickly, is the vehicle aerodynamics. And typically what we try to do here is to look at the lift drag performance of the vehicle. Could be the loadings on the various components when vehicle turns, what kind of a performance we want to look at it. If I have certain components like helmets, the windshields, etc., then how do I look at the aerodynamic performance, because that is directly linked to the speed as well as the economy and so on, and the stability of the vehicle itself. One of the very important aspect here to consider is majority of the time what we do consider is the wind tunnel sort of a situations where flow is determined initially. But when I'm looking at the realistic on the road wind patterns, okay, traffic situations, and because of that, what sort of a turbulence could come in, and then based on that determining my KPIs like the drag, lift, as well as the fuel economies and so on. So that is very important, and that is something today could be possible with the technologies that we have based on the LBM methods, wherein we can look at the real world aerodynamic situation and then design my vehicle in more realistic way. So that's one of the important areas to look at when I'm looking at the aerodynamic sort of the simulations. Other very important aspect is the dirt management on the soiling, because today, if you look at Indian environment, we get almost 3 to 4 months as a rainy period, and there is a lot of dirt, mud accumulated on the roads. And when vehicle or the rider negotiate this sort of a situations, there is a lot of dirt which will then get deposited onto a vehicle, and there are certain critical parts on the vehicle like front shock absorber or the engines and so on, where if the dirt deposition happens beyond certain limit, then it could actually hamper the performance. In case of shock absorber, if the dirt goes inside the shock absorbers, then it can contaminate your oil, and then obviously it may lead to the design issues, warranty issues, and so on. And similarly for the engine, it could lead to a thermal issues. So that's one of the very important areas today we address doing the soiling or the wheel spray soiling type of a simulations. The other areas where we can look at is the vehicle water wading sort of a simulations, where we are checking if the water levels are enough or not enough, or what sort of water levels are there, which then can water can go inside the vehicle's critical component. It could be anything, engine, exhaust, and so on. So that some of the areas what we can look at the concept stage itself through the simulations. The other very important area is the lubrications, where we have the drivetrains, powertrains, and lubrication is very important aspects in terms of providing the coolings, the smooth operations of the gear trains, etc. And that's where how my lubrication is effective, whether my oil is reaching to all the areas where I want that. So that is something if I want to decide at a concept stage using the simulation. So today it's possible using these fluid simulations where I'm typically looking at what speed, what is the speed where my lubrication performance is optimum, whether my oil is reaching to a various locations effectively and so on. So that's very important area to also look at when it comes to the drivetrain. Coming to the vehicle stability, of course, this is one of the areas from a safety point of view also, and the dynamics point of view also is very important. That because that's where we are looking at taking a lot of dynamic turns, etc., on the vehicle, but without having vehicle to fall or fall down. So that's where multi-body system simulation tools, which could help, where we can look at a lot of different scenarios like vehicle ride and handling, stability, different load cases. And then on top of that, how do I look at the durability itself, where I'm looking at the life of various components based on these sort of scenarios. So you can look at these animations where I'm looking at how vehicle is taking the turns and whether vehicle is stable or not on those aspects as well. Simultaneously, I can also look at not only the vehicle dynamics, the overall my gear train, wall train, and the powertrain performance, the multi-body systems, and then on top of that, looking at the noise and vibration itself. So, as I said, we can look at various things, but very important factor here to consider is many times we consider rider as rigid, and that's where my performance or the real conditions are not mimicked in the simulations. That is where we are looking at how do I consider the rider as a flexible body and with the joints, etc., and then look at the vehicle performance in an effective way, and that basically reflects my real world conditions very well. It could be a vehicle dynamic scenarios, or it could be a braking, etc. So that basically makes a lot of difference in terms of the quantities that we are assessing from the right of view. So here you can see where we are considering the rigid rider as well with respect to the flexible rider. The other important thing is not just the vehicle, but how the vehicle dynamic scenarios interfere with the fluid flows or the aerodynamic situations, wherein my multi-body system model can then be integrated with the CFD, where I am looking at the wind patterns, the loads coming in because of the crosswinds, etc., and that goes as an input to my multi-body system simulations. And that's where I could then assess the realistic performance and the stability or the dynamics of the vehicles. And that's sort of a multi-domain or multi-physics sort of a simulations we are addressing over here, adding more physics to the simulations and then getting the realistic performance. You can look at this as the same example, what I'm highlighting over here. Because of the wind, there is a lateral displacements of the bike there. Along with that, of course, the strength and the durability is very important aspect, because that's ultimately all the scenarios will boil down to the strength and the durability of my vehicle or the motorcycle. This is one example from Yamaha Motors, where they are basically looking at the radiator assembly and how they can protect it when there is a rollover of the vehicles, vehicle hits to the ground, and how they can design this cover system more effectively. And that's where I'm looking at designing this through the various finite element based simulations using Abacus solver, where I'm looking at strength of these various components. Another trend today is in terms of the lightweighting, what we have observed in the motorcycle industry, where they are looking at improving the motorcycle performance, but at the same time improving the economy, the fuel economy, as well as the lightweighting. And this lightweighting aspects also very important when we are looking at the electric vehicles, where we want to improve the range of the vehicle. And that's where I want to minimize the weight. And that is where I'm looking at a lot of optimizations. And then on top of that, looking at manufacturing these parts using the additive manufacturing technologies, where I can look at the full potential of the optimized design itself. And that is where I want to look at the same strength of this component as that of the traditional manufactured components. So that is where a lot of additive manufacturing sort of a simulation goes in, where you ensure that you have the enough strength or the same strength, and then use the same design, which is lightweight as well. I just wanted to highlight here a small video where how our various solutions can integrate with each other to address the larger goal that we have. So in this case, maybe I'm looking at the design of the brake disc in an optimum way, where I have various KPIs from the NVH point of view, durability point of view, and yet I want to get the lighter design. So you just can visualize, look at this video. Ultimately, I'm achieving all my KPIs and still I'm getting the lightweight designs. And that's typically possible through the simulations and integrating various technologies that we have. One of the very important topic that I want to just touch upon today is the vehicle electrification, because you now see in the market a lot of electric vehicles are coming in, of course, from the four-wheeler point of view, but two-wheelers are the pioneer in the electric vehicle segment. A lot of two-wheelers coming in, a lot of new two-wheelers are getting into the market, and that's one of the important area for the future to focus. And that's where, since this is the new area, simulations plays a wonder in this field, because the things that you may come to know later through simulations, you can target it now, achieve the KPIs, and design a system in a right way. Because today we are looking at shortening our design cycles, because everyone wants to get this electric vehicle out very fast in the market, and that's where the simulations will play a very important role. When I look at the two-wheeler segment, there are a lot of changes that needs to be made based on the electrification. You now have the battery packs. That's a very important component. You have a lot of electrical cables, wire harness, and so on. You have electric motors, and then of course the other PCBs, inverters, charging units, and so on. So all these will come in picture. These are the new components compared to the traditional vehicles. And of course, designing these components, getting the right performance of this component is very important when I'm looking at the optimal range of the vehicles. And obviously, if I look at in the past few years back, the range was very less, but today the range is improving, and in the future the target is to improve even more. How it is possible? This is today can be possible using various simulations, including the part that I have highlighted, lightweightings, and then obviously improving the battery performance and so on through the simulations. So today we work with a lot of customers in terms of improving the battery performance, design, improving the durability through the simulations and so on. And there are a lot of workflows that we have today, which can help you to look at the regulations that we have through simulations, and trying to see how we assess the performance and the integrity of the various battery packs related aspects. It could be a thermoelectrical safety point of view, where I'm looking at the nail penetration or the drops, crush, etc., the strength, the thermal management of the entire battery packs, and the module systems. So that's one of the very important aspects. We are also looking at electric drives, how we can define the electric drives efficiently. Then the motor design itself, how we can design the motor in an optimum way so that it gives me the higher performance, higher torque, and these characteristics. I just wanted to highlight one very important and a nice case study on the two-wheeler side, how we are using our solutions to improve the range of the vehicle, and then managing the thermal aspects of the battery. So there is no audio here as such, but what we are looking at is what is the aerodynamic performance, and then how the cooling effectively can happen to the battery packs itself, so that I could reduce the entire temperatures. And then obviously that affects the durability of the battery, as well as the performance, the range, and so on. So that is what I am looking at in this. How do I design the parts differently? Maybe fins, etc. What kind of openings that I can have, and so on. So here we are really looking at also the combining systems level simulations to the 3D simulation itself. Yeah, so ultimately I'm achieving all my KPIs through a better design. Towards the end, I just wanted to highlight a very important and very good case study by our customer Royal Enfield on how they are using our solutions to design and validate their motorcycles.
Mr. Steeper, there's no audio for this particular testimony.
Okay, I will narrate it, but so Royal Enfield using simulation trade-off studies and also look at the lightweight design, grip structure, and improving the durability of the various engine components. They have done some optimization to design the grip structures based on the frequencies. Using optimization. So today they are looking at the durability of the entire system instead of doing it at a different level, using multiple system templates and enhancing the durability of the entire system, so that they don't need to look at all components in an isolation. In the process, they have devised innovative ways. For example, one example is typical system is the force fast system, where simulations were performed to get the similar strength as that of the force. So this case study is available on the YouTube also for our viewers. Unfortunately, the audio is not coming in, but they can always look at and search for this case study on the YouTube as well. So in summary, today, if I look at the complexity of the motorcycle segment or the two-wheeler segment is increasing. A lot of systems are coming in, especially when I'm looking at electric vehicle and so on. So that's where we are looking at a lot of physics are going into the simulations with a lot of domains at a lot of scales. And today what we are looking at a system of systems. And that's where even from a simulation point of view, we should look at not only just one physics, but maybe a multi-physics, and considering all the domains, all the scales. And today that could be possible with our technologies, which are integrated today. And thanks to the platform that we have, that is 3D experience platform, wherein all these technologies can be integrated, they can talk to each other seamlessly. And that's where we can look at the system of systems. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening me patiently. If you have any question, obviously I can take this question now, if time is there. But if you have still follow-up question, you can always reach out to me on my email ID, which is mentioned on this slide itself. Thank you all. Thank you, Autocar, for giving us an opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shreepal. That was an interesting presentation, and I'm pretty sure, our audience is excited. And I can already see a couple of questions that have popped up during your presentation. So I'll try and take a few of the questions. We are running short on time, but we'll try and get some of them answered. Coming to the first question is from Chandranath Trivedi. He's asking what efforts are made by OEMs for battery safety in electric two-wheelers. I'm assuming he's referring to a few of the cases that have been highlighted in the current few days.
Yeah, that's very interesting question. So what I'm seeing now is battery safety is given a very important priority, even from the regular design point of view as well as the regulation point of view, because I believe there are certain regulation exist as well. So lot of today the industry is in early stages, I would say, but definitely they are looking at using the simulations to improve the safety. And there are, what I highlighted in my presentation is to do a lot of simulations, especially the crash, the nail penetration sort of simulations, to ensure that the safety is utmost important. Secondly, they're also looking at the thermal management, so that you have effective cooling for the battery system itself, so that it should not get heated up. And that is where a lot of simulations goes in from the OEM side as well, to ensure that the safety is achieved. I hope I answered the question.
Then there's a question, I think I'll try and elaborate on the question, because I think what the gentleman wants to ask, he wants to know your thoughts on the conventional spare parts market and its business in the coming 2 and 5 years. So I'll just add a little bit. So do you see that, in addition to OEMs, even the aftermarket players are using the simulation to provide an alternative or a improved spare part for the...
Yes, that's very important area that we have seen across the globe, where a lot of suppliers, providing the components, they also started doing a lot of simulation, so that they also meet the required standards. They also have the as per validated designs, so that there should not be any issues once they go and fit those parts into the vehicle. So that is very much there. I already seen a lot of helmet manufacturers doing the simulations, a lot of my motor manufacturers, they're doing a lot of simulation, so that they get the product first time right.
Okay, and coming to real world fuel economy, when it comes to two-wheelers in India, we all know that the fuel economy is the key criteria for any motorcycle or a scooter designer. Yeah. So how much, if in case you can give some example of how much fuel efficiency can be improved through simulation, and how and if you have any examples, it would be great if you can share something.
Yeah, right now I don't have a very specific or quantifiable example to give, but in general, what we have observed is when we typically test or design or do the simulations, we typically look at a very realistic, very unreal, I wouldn't say unrealistic, but very theoretical sort of situations where wind tunnel, specific flow, etc. And that is where we decide and design our components. But when it goes to the real world, you have a lot of other effects coming in, which one of the slides I showed, you have a crosswind scenarios, the turbulence because of the traffic, etc. When I'm doing this sort of a simulation, I could include all of these effects vis-a-vis the test that I have a very standard test. And that is where I could look at the realistic performance of my vehicle, realistic numbers on my drags, etc. And then based on that, I could modify the design rather than looking at a very theoretical sort of or test-oriented results. And that's where simulation helps. Ultimately, that design which is simulated, then again go to the test, which would give definitely a better performance.
Then we have a question from another audience. He wants to know, with connected electric two-wheelers, can you integrate real-time data with simulations to find design problems to improve efficiency?
There are, I would say this is sort of a digital twin scenarios where we are acquiring a lot of data and then doing that and then improving the design itself. I would say that this is something happened in different industries where they are acquiring this data and using this data plus simulation models plus the artificial intelligence or the analytics model to utilize all of these things together to improve the design. And I'm sure even from the two-wheeler perspective or connected vehicle perspective, this should be the possible case.
Correct. And in real, as you have an experience of both the conventional two-wheelers as well as electric two-wheelers, is there a difference between the time to market, that simulation helps cut down for traditional vis-a-vis electric two-wheeler manufacturer?
Yes, so simulation definitely helps, because even in conventional, what we have seen olden days, it used to be a rough idea, maybe on a vehicle four-wheeler point of view, say 5 years or so development cycle, but now it is shrinking to even 3 years or sometimes less than that and so on. So that today exists even for the two-wheeler market, where even from a conventional vehicle point of view, we are looking at shrinking the product development timeline. And that is definitely today possible because of the simulations, because you do a lot of iteration through the simulation and then ultimately go to the test, because that will reduce a lot of time as well as the cost. And even from the electric vehicle point of view, that is true, because we are today looking at even the shorter development cycle for the electric vehicle. Otherwise, you will definitely miss that bus, and someone competitor can take that advantage. So that's where simulations are really going to help.
And I think one last question is what are the trends? What are the trends demanded in simulation, especially from the Indian two-wheeler context?
Yeah, so I see the very important trend today is looking at a platform which could integrate various simulation technologies. So that's something we are looking at it being discussed at various levels, because today, as I given an example, it's just not a single system. Today we have a system of systems, and we want to look at the simulations from the 1D to the 3D, from the micro level to the macro level, with a multiple domain, multiple physics involved. And that's definitely today not possible as a standalone solution. And that is where the platform which could integrate these technologies could help. So that's one of the very big trend what I am seeing in the segment. Second trend I am seeing is the cloud computation. When it comes to the simulations, today, a lot of scalability is required. Suddenly, you want to do hundreds of the simulations where you may not have in-house capacity. And that's where you are looking at the cloud sort of a computation, where you can easily do the simulation as and when required. So that is one of the areas that I'm looking at getting popular. And the third area slowly getting popular is looking at the data analytics and artificial intelligence on top of simulation results. So I see these three areas which are dominating in the two-wheeler industry.
Thank you, Mr. Sripath. I think we have already overshot our time, but it was indeed a great presentation, as well as an interesting thought after that. I'm pretty sure most of our audiences will be keen to reach out to you, as you have shared your email address. And I look forward to having more interactions with you. And I wish you have a great day ahead, and we'll keep engaging with similar companies.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thanks, audience. Thank you very much.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to end of our first technical presentation. Now we'll be heading to our second technical presentation. The topic for the second technical presentation is test logic EOL testing tool chain, a global approach for localized needs. The presentation is from Male, and we'll have two key presenters for the same. We'll have Mr. Sharad Bhatia, who's the head of Male Service Solutions Asia Pacific region and head of Male Aftermarket India, along with Mr. Andres Huber, global head of R&D and OE sales, Male Service Solutions. To summarize it, Mr. Bhatia will give a brief background about and introduce Male Service Solutions, followed by Mr. Andreas who will talk about Male Service Solutions product offerings. Now, before I hand it over to Mr. Sharad Bhatia, we'll have the same drill. We'll expect all the questions at the end. We'll try and take the questions at the end of the presentation. In case of any queries, do feel free to point it out in the chat box. Over to you, Mr. Bhatia.
Thanks, Nilesh. So allow me to share the screen, please. So Nilesh, is the screen visible?
Yes, we can see the screen. I'll request if you can go full screen. Yes, it's
okay.
proper.
Okay. So first of all, thanks Autocar as an event organizer for giving Male us an opportunity to showcase various technology platforms that we are serving to the industry, not only in India, but on a larger global base. Primarily, of course, we are quite reckoned as a parts-based industry, but over the period of time, we have digressed well towards the service solutions aspect as well. And that's the key area that we would be focusing for today's session. So moving very quickly, I will cover the most of the business part of the Male, starting from the group, then cascading down to the aftermarket, from where myself and Andreas Huber, we both are responsible for, quite giving a shape to Male as an international network service provider, more towards the products and the services, what sort of a communication information platform that we have with all our business partners. And finally, to the crux of the decision plan for today, that's the Male Test Logic end of the line tool chain solution, which we call it as a global approach, something like a localized version on a global platform, which of course Andreas will take over in detail. So Male Group, of course, as we all reckon, is a German MNC with over about 70,000 employees. We have more or less production plants in all the continents of the world, 160 production locations. We have 12 R&D centers, sales of about 10 billion euro. And we have various diversified verticals, mainly can be segmented into two of them. One is providing the parts to the OES industry. And then the second vertical, where both myself again and Andreas come, is into the aftermarket domain. And so moving on, yes, we do kind of reckon ourselves as partners of the international automotive industry. So as we see in briefly, this slide summarizes that we have the systems, the parts available for all the vehicle dynamics, starting from the engine systems and the components. That precisely Male is recognized worldwide. When it started its operations way back in 1920s, started on the engine component side with piston, cylinder liners, components, etc. And then moving on to the filtration and engine peripherals. Then somewhere early 2000, we moved into the scope of the thermal management, where again, we are playing a very, very critical role as of now, when whole of the world is moving on to the electrification of the automotive industry. Thermal management, of course, plays a very vital role towards the cooling of the various battery management or battery packs, what we can understand them as. Then, of course, since the electronics and the mechatronics with various diversified the components that are being engaged into running off the various vehicle, we can say, platforms. And finally, we come to the aftermarket, where if I can also connect to the kind of concluding minutes of the previous session, where one gentleman had asked a very relevant question as to what is industry doing on the aftermarket side of the business and how we are serving the industry, or who else is participating in that. So yes, we can very well say with good amount of confidence from Male that we are working round the clock, not only on the parts business side, but also on the service industry side, to make sure that in the independent aftermarket per se, we have a very strong contribution given to the industry to make sure that all times the vehicles are being run on road with smooth and accurate precision. So, of course, traditionally, yes, MAHLE is definitely kind of oriented towards the internal combustion engines. That's what we have been known for, starting from 20s, 50s, and 70s, and even 90s. But then starting 2000 onwards, we have quite diversified ourselves into the field of the mechatronics, and then moving on to the part of the thermal management, and then now quite actively involved towards the drive systems, the fuel cells, and the power and the software industry. But having said that, we still kind of reckon ourselves as a very strong player in the aftermarket and in the OE industry on the IC engines. And of course, we have declared that we would be the last man standing to support whichever vehicle running wherever on the world in terms of having an IC engine installed in that. Then I move on to the part of our MAHLE aftermarket. So again, we have quite a sizable presence across the globe, almost about 2,000 employees worldwide, 30 years of experience that we are promoting and selling various brands into the aftermarket, with MAHLE being the flagship of all the brands together. And per se, I mean, we kind of cater to all the needs that are required in any part of the world per se for any independent aftermarket. Of course, now the time has come where we are digressing ourselves, moving from the parts industry to the service industry, and that is what we are going to take as the balance part of the presentation today. In terms of our aftermarket expertise, as I already mentioned, so our OE portfolio, what we are showing on the left-hand part of the side, starting from the IC engine to the battery electric vehicle, hybrid, synthetic fuels, and then to the hydrogen fuel cells. So this is kind of a rapid transfer that we are witnessing all across the globe. And so we are kind of tick marking ourselves into each and every sort of a type of the vehicles that are being run as of now, or what are being planned for the future industry in various parts of the world. But yes, we will be having parts, or we are having parts available for all the aftermarket needs and for all the vehicle segments. This comes a very important part of the presentation today, which is kind of setting the context, because as I mentioned that so far MAHLE is known worldwide on more or less on the parts side, but it's also important to share with the industry, and especially with the forum today, that we have digressed pretty aggressively in the last 6-7 years into the aftermarket service and repair solutions, where we have, starting from the Tech Pro diagnostics, these are the simplistic so-called the VCI diagnostics hardware platforms that kind of check for any malfunctioning of any parameter of the vehicle. Moving on to the digital ADAS. So ADAS, of course, is getting a lot of prominence across the globe, starting mainly in the West so far, Europe, US, of course, and then Asia, still not so much, but I think it's just down the line, probably by 2025, 26, that India will also see a good amount of growth in the requirement of digital ADAS. And then, of course, we have all the kind of traditional workshop equipments that are being used to service, to repair our cars, starting with the AC service units, the automatic transmission, oil exchanger, the nitrogen tire inflation, etc. Plus, we also have a kind of a digital MAHLE customer portal, wherein we give the possibility to business partners, not only to the distributors, to the retailers, down the line, even to the workshops, mechanics, etc., where they have the possibility to have access to our online portal, raise a ticket for any concern that they might be having in terms of the delivery, in terms of the malfunctioning of any product that we would have supplied to them, so that we could understand their concerns in detail and then answer them accordingly. So very quickly to run through, not spending so much time on this slide, of course, more or less like a global network that we have. So as we can see, this map clearly defines that we have a wide range of presence, more or less covering each and every corner of the world. And also this slide states as to how we have digressed, moving from left to right, more or less already emphasized, starting from the engine components to the gasket filtrations. So the first three columns, of course, very well summarize as the engine peripheral system, what we can call it as main functioning of the IC engine. And then in the middle of the slide, what we see as the engine cooling and the cabin cooling, namely defined by the air conditioning. So we have all the parts available there as well. Finally, moving to the right side, where we are working on the mechatronics for the starter motors and the alternators, etc. And then moving on to the e-mobility and the electronics, where we so-called have also production parts available for the actuator switches, and then moving on to the drive systems. Finally, again, coming back to the workshop equipment. So as I mentioned, so the first three verticals here typically define what are being used or what are the equipments that are being used at a generalized workshop. Arctic Pro is a very common one that is being used by the workshop mechanics to serve for a vehicle for any AC gas refrigerant exchange. Then comes a bit more technical, where we are having the Tech Pro devices, the so-called hardware VCIs, to check any malfunctioning of any equipment, etc. These are being used by the OEMs for their distribution setup, for their mechanic outlets, etc. And then, of course, the Fluid Pro, which is again at a generalized workshop equipment for any exchange of the transmission oil or the engine oil, etc., power steering oil. And finally, on the right-hand side is where, again, we finally set the context for today's extended session on the technical part that Mahle provides as a service solutions, not only to the OEMs, but also to the workshops levels, etc., is what we call it as a Logic Pro. So this is basically the end of the line test system, what we call it as, when the final vehicle has been assembled on an OEM shop floor, and then it's being ready for a rollout to the distributor network, etc. So the last set of tests that are being done to check any malfunctioning of any errors, etc., in any of the vehicle components or any of the accuracies, etc. So this itself, where Mahle takes a major lead in terms of not only providing the complete software, but then also providing the hardware to assess of any issues, etc. So this is basically what I wanted to present as kind of a sharing platform for to showcase as to what we do in the industry, starting from the OE side, moving down south to the aftermarket. And then I hand it over to my colleague, Andreas Huber. So Andreas, all over to you, where you can just run us from our approach on the test logic AOL tool chain solutions. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely, Sharad. Thank you very much for your introduction and for the overview. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me here today in the presentation. Over the next few slides, I'll go a little bit more in detail what Sharad already started mentioning about the end-of-line tool chain, which we are offering, but not necessarily what we're offering, but I think what the major manufacturers for two-wheelers, but also passenger cars and others are facing currently on the end-of-line side, and how to approach that. Mahle Service Solutions, as Sharad mentioned, is part of the aftermarket, but at the same time, we're building somewhat the bridge between the aftermarket and the OE side, which is quite unique within Mahle and gives us a good insight in the collaboration with the OEMs on the end-of-line testing and ensuring the vehicles are going down the line are in good quality, and when they're going out to the customers and being sold, they work and they function as expected. But also then we're offering a lot of tools in the after sales as well, as Sharad mentioned, which then will help us to transition this data also for servicing vehicles on motorcycles afterwards in the dealerships, in the shops, to repair them, to maintain them, and keep them up and running. So, Sharad, can you please go to the next slide? So what I want to address today a little bit is growing the vehicle on the agenda. I will talk a little bit about the growing vehicle complexity and the related testing, what's needed for that. Tool chain flexibility and how it's based and how we can adjust to the budget constraints. Data for end-of-line testing, it's really important, I think, for improving manufacturing processes on the long run. Local support, Mahle is a global organization, but we strongly believe that we have to be where our customers are. Otherwise, it won't work. And I think this is not just for us. I think this is for anybody a key how to make things work. Then another topic which I would like to talk quickly about is knowledge management in your plant, in the dealership, how to retain your knowledge. People are moving on over time and the knowledge is getting lost. And here are a few thoughts on how to retain knowledge and increase it. And then also how to efficiently manage your testers in the plant or your systems in the plant to be always up to date and know what's happening where. So from there, I'd like to go to the first topic here. the vehicle complexity is going more and more growing. We're seeing more and more systems per vehicle. The test routines which need to be performed in a plant is significantly increasing over the last 5 years. And the flash files are getting bigger, the flash timing gets bigger, which also means the cycle time goes bigger and larger, which is actually at the end cost for the car manufacturer, the motorcycle manufacturer. So really the challenge is here, how can we reduce that time? One of the options is definitely using new vehicle protocols like CAN-FD, DoIP, and so on. But the second one is also, how can we parallel communicate and flash on the maximum number of buses and systems to get the vehicle and the motorcycle flashed in as short amount of time as possible. In order to do that, you also will need a very efficient authoring tool to manage this complex and large data-driven approach trends. And then really you need to be able to visualize it also for yourself to understand which test procedures, which flashing, whatever runs in the production line, at in which station. You cannot do everything at each station. So it's really, that's really important. And we have an authoring tool where we can offer this, but really the key is also the hardware, how to parallelize this kind of activity. So from here, the next one, tool chain flexibility. It's always, you have a global tool chain, which meets different needs, passenger cars, trucks, and motorcycles. Our approach is to have one global tool chain, which meets all the different needs, but then we're going to be able to tailor it to the specific needs for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, passenger cars, whatever it's needed. And really, you have to be able to, in order to do this, you have to be able to work with different kind of hardware options. Is it a full-blown portable tester? Is it a laptop tablet with a vehicle communication interface? Is it maybe an embedded hardware without any user interface? Maybe it's just software communicating via another hardware over it. So really, the scalability in the hardware is really a big topic, as well as the scalability in the software. And the database size, the more vehicles you're testing, the database size really significantly increased, which slows down the performance again, and which has a huge impact. So the idea here is really, how can you minimize your database size to support the various options? And also, when you support that many different hardware options, how can you manage it to author it once and reuse it multiple times without retesting everything every single time? And here really, the key is data-driven, but really a very efficient data-driven model for a very small footprint and being scalable to do this at the same time. So then when you're doing end-of-line testing, there's a lot of things happening. You collect a lot of data about your vehicles, about your production process, and so on, which is really important for the motorcycle manufacturers to improve the efficiency in the plant, in the end-of-line process, but also in other things, and also finding weaknesses in their products. We saw earlier in the presentation a lot about simulations to find weaknesses and try to improve them. But also in the end-of-line testing, you find a lot of weaknesses about wiring harnesses, about maybe other strategies from the electrical side, which then you can feed that information back to your plant. So you need a very efficient management, and you're collecting a lot of data. So really the important thing is not just collecting the data, being able to look at the data in real time, and also having systems in place which directly pinpoint you to the problems. But it's also very important to be able to run this either on premise or in the cloud, whatever you prefer depending on your size, depending on your location. If you have distributed locations, it's really important to do this. So it's really an essential part here as well. Part of this system is also software licensing and the distribution management. So how are you able to update testers with new test strategies on the fly? How do you know which testers run which test strategies at which time? So these are all things which are really elemental to the overall process to ensure on the one side data security with the cloud and with the safety measures behind, but on the other side really also efficiency and quick reaction time if you see any issues arising in your production plan. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we're a global team. We have locations, major development locations in US, in Italy, and in India, and in China. but we also have regional teams, smaller teams, wherever our customers are. And I think the key here really is that you have well-trained teams on the local tool chains and technologies, which are accessible from a customer perspective, but also from know how to access our domain knowledge centers globally. They're very knowledgeable in the key products, and they have a very strong domain expertise, not just in the end-of-line process, but in general in the production process, because there's a huge synergy and a leverage if you can combine this, and you can work together we can work together with our customers to optimize the production process based on our knowledge on electrical testing and end-of-line testing, but also based on the manufacturer's knowledge on how a vehicle at best is manufactured in which segment. On top of that, really global experience is the key. We need to have, in order to support this on a global tool chain, it's not just about the local team, which yes, is the first phase to the customer, but at the same time, you need a strong support from the global organization to the local teams. You need to be able to cross-share the best practices from all regions. We had projects where we actually in Europe, they ran in Europe, and we had support from China, from US, and from India in order to get the best out of it, because the customer wanted to have something which partially it was implemented already in India, partially in China, and really here a global team which works closely together and leverage the global expertise for each local project is really a key essential here. So with that, knowledge management in your plant as well as in the dealerships. A big challenge which we are seeing, which many manufacturers have, is maintain the knowledge in-house. Also how to distribute the knowledge between the headquarters and the dealerships, and as well as the production side. How do you enable your organization to collaborate with each other and helping each other out? And one of the key topics here is really, how can you get simple access to data and the know-how? That you have smart workflows like escalation management, information management, also tag new articles, new information for the certain user groups, what you need to do. Mahle, we are offering a solution here called Mahle Forum, which we're using actually with one large two-wheeler already right now in India in all of their dealerships. And it's really a knowledge management, data management, document management system, which actually helps us to collaborate, or helps our customers to really collaborate inside. The key here is the data is being owned by the vehicle manufacturer. It's not owned by us. We're just providing the tool and the infrastructure to build this together, but it's really to ensure how the knowledge stays within the organization, even over time when people are leaving, new people coming on board, how they're getting faster trained, and so on and so forth. And one key topic here is that the system which we're offering is not just the system by itself, it also has a huge portion of analytics which you can leverage to improve your system by itself, your processes, but also increase your efficiencies there as well. So overall, with this kind of systems, you're being able to increase your product and service quality. So my last point today is really efficient tester management. Once you have a production line and you have testers in the production line, you always need to know where they are, what are they doing, what software running there are they running on, are they functional or do they have an issue, and so on and so forth. So an extensive tester management process, also with software update management, is really key to ensure that production lines are running most efficiently. The risk of the wrong tester in the wrong station with a wrong test performed, it's not a good idea. So really the key is to know where the testers are, what are they doing, and also you can learn from that. Also you increase your flexibility and reduce the roadblocks. But also if you want to try out some new test procedures, you don't, with this test management, you don't need to load a new software on all the testers. You can load it on a few simple testers in some specific stations, try it out there first before you deploy it into the full production line. This is also risk mitigation, and it also makes ensure that you're just much more efficient in that side. And it helps you to much faster respond to line changes because you can dedicate locate your testers and really only update these testers at first. And you even can define when you want to update the testers. You don't want to update them while they're working, so you want to update them while they're maybe charging, while they're maybe connected, or in some of their idle time. So that's why testers really need to understand what has been done, when and where, and what they're supposed to do next. And we call this location awareness, which is a system we're also offering as part of our overall product overview. So in order to conclude then from here, just a quick summary. So growing vehicle complexity and related testing. Our answer there is parallelization with some specific topics here. Tool chain flexibility based on budget constraints is really platform scalability. It's not just tool chain, it's really platform in hardware and in software. Your data in your cloud, really clear data ownership and data privacy and data security. This is really key and essential because this is critical data and it needs to be stored safely so that nobody can access unauthorized data in any way. Local support is key. Be wherever your customers are. I think this is just must have, and it's absolutely essential. Knowledge management in your plant and dealerships. It's a solution we are offering here. It's a collaboration platform called Mahle Forum. And I think that alone would take me hours to explain you and show you how cool it is. And I'm really thrilled about that solution more than many other things, because it's just amazing what we can do with this and what we have achieved with this so far. And then really the efficient tester management with location and system awareness. And overall, I think this is particularly important. Some of these topics are particularly important for India, especially the scalability. Also, we heard it earlier, the move to electrical drivetrains. There are a lot of new things coming up, a lot of issues which you also will see in your production lines. And really to gain that knowledge, to gain that feedback and feed it back to the engineering departments to really be faster and have a superior product later on in the market is really key going forward to stay on top of the industry. And we believe that with our solutions and our offering and our team, especially in India, but also with the global support wherever, we really can help you to get there. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Andres. Thanks for a well informed presentation. No doubt, absolutely rightly said, data is the key asset as of now. I mean, we can also say in light words, more than the crude, data is something that is gaining importance or recognition worldwide. And we at Mahle are working or striving hard to ensure all the three key parameters, let's say peripheral to the data, that's the ownership, that's the connectivity, and finally, that's the management. And of course, what Andreas rightly mentioned is we have the tool, the service solution complete available for the OEMs, for the workshops, for the mechanics community as large based in terms of providing key connectivity between the vehicle and to the end user, which of course, what we understand as a data. So this kind of summarizes our informatics session as of today. We would be welcoming if the forum has any questions to check upon.
Thank you, Sharath. Thank you, Andres. So we have a couple of questions. One of the questions the attendee wants to know, are the testing methods different for electric vehicles compared to your traditional IC vehicles?
The testing, so from a connectivity perspective, no. From the test functions we perform, some of them are the same, like flashing, like configuration and so on. And some of them are more extensive with electrical vehicles when you talk about connectivity and how everything ties together and so on and so forth. So I would say it's mostly the same, but there's some slight differences and some nuances where you really have to watch out for on the electrical, if you talk about electrical vehicles.
Another question is in the two-wheeler space, India was the first country to adopt the BS6 now or the Euro 6 now, which was later on, which is now being slated for the developed markets. So is that that India was the first market where Mahle had to come out with a solution for Indian market, which is now will be rolled out to the global market?
So, I mean, no doubt, India, in terms of the two-wheeler motorcycle scooter production, leads the world platform. And of course, what we understand, or this was kind of a key challenge for us, where Andreas mentioned that we already are, or what we already provided as a solution to one of the key flagship OEM in India. So yes, India definitely was kind of the first for us in our radar in Asia Pacific. And moving forward, we are also working with various other OEMs in India and also for their overseas requirements, mainly in Europe and also in China. Because what we reckon is that the transition between the IC engines to the electric vehicles is happening. And definitely on the two-wheeler industry, it's happening at a much rapid pace. But, and also to link to your previous question here, Nilesh, the fact is what we understand at MAHLE, electric vehicles will definitely be having a bit more complex system to challenge with in terms of the data management, in terms of having the vehicle diagnostics involved. Battery management system is the key thing right now, where we have already the solution available in terms of the two-wheeler industry. So yes, India had been the one key focus for MAHLE. Moving forward, also it will remain as a key focus, more or less.
Correct. And you mentioned that it's you bringing a global approach, a global solution, but adapted for the local needs. So can you elaborate? I mean, what are the unique trends that you're witnessing in the Indian market that is not seen somewhere else in the developed world?
I wouldn't say it's not seen somewhere else, but one of the simplest examples is the need for example, Android applications versus standard Windows-based applications for some of the procedures and tests we're running. And another topic really is in the two, I would say especially two-wheeler industry, the production setup of a two-wheeler production line is in India is quite different than in other regions, and to adjust there from how to manage your testers and also how to adjust your reporting system with data being managed, collected in India. But many of the Indian two-wheelers, they're not just in India, they're all over Southeast Asia and even in other regions. And then you're getting challenged with cloud-based solutions, you're getting challenged with on-premises and in cloud-based solutions combined, and you need to find ways to manage that data efficiently or across the different boundaries. And that's where we're really seeing a main challenge here, especially from the India market, because the market is just working a little bit different than other regions. I don't know, Sharad, if you have to add anything here as well.
Well, more or less, yes, Andreas rightly mentioned. In the crude form, we can say abuse of the vehicle, what we see in overall in Asia definitely is much more as compared to the Western part of the world. So that is a key challenge that, we have to face at all given point of times, be it with the software that we provide or more or less, more importantly, on the hardware that we provide to the aftermarket network. So yeah, that's a key challenge that we are facing.
And where do you see, you mentioned that, you're not just working with OEs, you're also working with aftermarket and smaller players as well. And you mentioned that, one of the key USPs for MAHLE is to be able to bring out budget-friendly solutions. So can you elaborate on that? What kind of advantages, say, a small workshop can, gain from MAHLE's aftermarket solutions?
We do recognize, of course, on the business side, I can elaborate, and maybe on the technical side, then Andreas can mention, we do recognize that India is a very cost-sensitive market. Absolutely no doubt about that. And so is the very much ASEAN market. Countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, they are equally price sensitive. For our business partners at the workshop level, we have to provide them with key turnkey solutions where it effectively gives them an opportunity to manage their cash flow at the first end while implementing that particular tool chain software or the hardware provided from our side, and also maintain a very effective cash flow in terms of the annual maintenance of the toolkit that we have provided to them. So there, of course, our teams in Europe and in collaboration with the teams in India on a local base are working hand in hand, because the inputs, of course, are provided by the Indian teams to the European team to make sure that at what sort of a cost level, what software, what hardware has to be provided. And then once this information has been provided, then the Europe team, of course, then comes up with an appropriate solution. Maybe then, Andreas, you can add it over here.
Perfect, Sarad. Nothing to add.
Yeah, okay.
That was quite an interesting point, that the Indian team's inputs are being utilized for your global development because of the cost sensitivity, especially in the ASEAN region. I think we have few minutes for more questions. If you permit, I'll take for there's a question: are there testing centers in different parts of, is there any difference in the testing centers across India? You've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So are there any different solutions that you have to come up with for different parts of the country?
I would say not really. It depends more on the vehicle application and what are the kind of the issues that we have to tackle in terms of the diagnostic behavior assessing of the vehicle. Again, Andreas, maybe you can add here.
I think the testing centers across the country in India that don't really change. But what our solutions offering is, even on the, now we're talking maybe a little bit about after sales, but what we're offering is a different scalability even there for different kind of products and different kind of use cases, for maybe larger dealerships versus smaller dealerships, or maybe some aftermarket shops. Because even here, number of functions which need to be performed, the price sensitivity, and also the data collection of the tools differ here quite significantly. And as a small aftermarket shop, you don't really need to collect all the data, because you only have your shop and the data, and you know what you're doing every day in and out. But if you're a dealership and part of a large OEM organization, you want to know what's happening in every dealership. You want to know what's happening with all your motorcycles. You want to know where you have your issues and how to address them. And so there's different use cases which we can scale and adapt for. And I think also one of the key topics really is about the solutions we're offering. You don't have to take everything. We're not saying, okay, if you work with solution A from Mahle, you have to have B, C, and D. We're scalable enough to saying you can run only on A, you can only run on this next tool, or you can combine them and have them work together. But we have open interfaces which we're sharing also with partners, but also with sometimes with our customers, in order to connect to other systems. So we're really flexible here and open, and I think that's one of the key elements as well.
We have a question from Mr. Kiran, who is I'm not sure, I'll keep it open-ended. So he's asked a very specific question: how Mahle differentiates from others on price point?
The simple answer would it always depends. I think we have shown, or since when we started as Mahle Service Solutions in India in 2015, that's when we started. That's when I joined Mahle Service Solutions. And I have some history with India. I lived in India for a while. And one of the key topics when I came aboard was to establish a well-established organization in India. And over the last few years, I think we have proven to many customers in India that we are very price competitive. And how we're differentiating, it's not just about price, but it's also about how we can tailor our solutions to the customer needs so that it's most efficient for them and reduces cost also in their production processes. It's not always about the investment of the tool, but it's also how much cost can you save with the tool. And I think here you really need to look at the TCO, total cost of ownership. And here we can, just with our global expertise, global knowledge, global tool chain, localized to the local needs of the customer. And one topic is really trying to listen to the customer and work out solutions there together with the customer, which are really fitting their needs, really helps them to minimize their TCO.
Nilesh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Lastly, someone has put a appreciation for you. It says that Mahle's knowledge management platform is noteworthy in view of the high job market flux. So he has shared his sincere appreciation. And with that, I'll ask you gentlemen if you have any closing comments before we end this session.
Well, at least for the Indian aftermarket, not only for the aftermarket, but overall for the Indian automotive industry landscape, we would request the forum here to keep a close watch on Mahle. I mean, we are working aggressively into the electric domain as well. I mean, of course, IC engine has been our key expertise area so far. And so have a close watch on all the new technology, new innovations that we will be going to present to the industry in the coming months, in coming years. And definitely these are exciting times ahead for all of us.
Andres, anything that you would like to add?
Andres?
No, it's not nothing specific, but just if somebody has more specific questions on the products, what we're offering, whatever, feel free, reach out to us. We are more than happy to respond and work together with you and discuss your challenges and see if we can help you out in any way.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Andres. And of course, we'll be engaging more with Male and more frequently, and we'll keep everyone in the loop about it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to end of the second technical presentation and also the 4th day of Autocar Professionals Two-Wheeler Industry Week. Stay with us. With tomorrow, with that, we have a session on the premium biking and the way forward. We'll start our session at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies, have a nice
Thank
day.
you.